and say...
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Gaza's health ministry says more than 500 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes since Israel broke a ceasefire deal with Hamas on Tuesday. The health ministry says more than 200 of the dead are children. This comes as Israeli ground troops expanded the war by re-entering part of northern Gaza. NPR's Anas Baba visited a hospital in the north and has this report.
Israel's military says it struck Hamas infrastructure and weapons site in the area of Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. Families there say it was their homes and their children asleep in the night that were struck by Israeli warplanes without warning. The floors of the Indonesian hospital in Beit Lahia are covered in blood and bodies wrapped in shrouds. The hospital morgue says 75 people died here overnight and into the morning from the airstrikes, including entire families. We were just sitting at home. Oh Allah, we only have you, says Yusuf Abu Halima. He says Israeli airstrikes just hit before dawn, killing his brother, sister, and other relatives. Anas Baba, NPR News, Gaza City.
President Trump is expected to sign an executive action today calling for the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. NPR's Corey Turner reports this has been foreseen since February, when the White House revealed its intentions.
The anticipated signing comes a week after sweeping layoffs at the Education Department. Between early retirement, buyouts, the firing of newer hires, and last week's big reduction in force, the department will soon be down to roughly half the size it was when Trump took office. The White House insisted in a fact sheet to NPR that the executive action would not cut key federal funding streams that help schools serve low-income students, kids with disabilities, and rural communities. But last week's purge included the entire legal staff at the department, responsible for making sure that funding is spent according to law and reaches the children who need it most. Corey Turner, NPR News.
A freeze on government-issued payment cards is threatening water safety testing and other projects at the U.S. Interior Department. NPR's Shannon Bond reports employees warn this is affecting their work.
Government pay card spending has been capped at $1 to comply with an executive order signed by President Trump last month. That affects millions of cards federal employees use in their work every day. A federal maintenance worker in the southern U.S. can't make payments for water safety testing. Employees at the U.S. Geological Survey can't buy equipment to repair stream gauges that monitor water flow. They have to rely on the single person in each region authorized to make payments. The spending freeze comes as Interior employees are bracing for job cuts of up to 40%. Shannon Bond, NPR News.
On Wall Street, stocks are significantly higher. The Dow is up more than 230 points. The Nasdaq is up almost 90 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The ownership group of the Boston Celtics has agreed to sell the team to William Chisholm, a managing director and co-founder of Symphony Technology Group. The price? $6.1 billion. Chisholm is a Dartmouth grad who grew up in Georgetown, Mass., a longtime Celtics fan. Symphony Technology Group is a California-based private equity firm. Celtics co-owner Rick Grousbeck is expected to remain governor of the team through the ownership transition. And it'll soon be more expensive to take an Uber or Lyft to Logan Airport. In a vote this morning, the Massport board has raised the fee for rideshare trips to and from the airport by more than $2 to a total of $5.50. That is, of course, on top of the cost of the ride itself. The higher fee takes effect in July. Massport board member John Nucci says the move is necessary to raise money for infrastructure upgrades meant to ease congestion in the communities surrounding Logan.
Nobody on this board wants to raise fees, but to do nothing right now, it could be a disaster waiting to happen. I know firsthand, living in East Boston, what it's like.
The vote is a win for Uber and Lyft. The companies had been worried about a potentially steeper fee hike. Some ride app drivers say they're worried the new fee will alienate riders and hurt their earnings. Sports, the Bruins start a 5-game road trip tonight, beginning with the Golden Knights in Vegas. Exhibition baseball, Red Sox and Twins play a 6 o'clock game this evening. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Walton Family Foundation, working to create access to opportunity for people and communities by tackling tough social and environmental problems. More information is at waltonfamilyfoundation.org.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with live music from Cuban-born jazz pianist Zili Zamora, plus retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Can't wait to talk to her. And media maven Sue O'Connell. And at 1 o'clock today, we're going to be joined by Donna Lieberman. She's part of the team that's representing, she's executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, but she's part of the team that's representing the Columbia graduate Mahmoud Khalil, whom Trump is attempting to deport. Hello again, Jim.
And an old friend of mine from decades ago.
I know. Maybe we'll hear stories about
City.
Junior Jim.
We will hear no stories about Jim or Donna from many years ago. First, though, here with us via Zoom is Chuck Todd. Chuck is the host of the Chuck Toddcast, political analyst, former moderator, of course, of NBC News Meet the Press. Hello there, Chuck.
How you doing, guys?
Good.
Well, you know, I'm like a lot of my fellow Americans. I just can't keep up. The tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. Today we're getting this edict to dismantle the education department. We're hearing about this massive purge at the Pentagon of websites about the Holocaust, which is odd since Trump is supposed to be in a big anti-Semitism kick, but he's also getting rid of websites having to do with cancer.
Anti-Semitism
That's right.
kick. Thank you.
Getting rid of stuff about sexual assault and cancer prevention. So I don't know. Where do you want to begin, Chuck?
Well, don't forget the wokeness of Jackie Robinson.
Exactly.
That's right. You know, that's right. The wokeness of
just another woke, you know, story, or the Tuskegee Airmen. It's there's the classic metaphor of coming in with a sledgehammer, right? You know, there's no scalpel here. Everything is a sledgehammer, and everything is performance for the MAGA base. And you know, it's sort of this whole stupid mantra of tech, which actually is not true. If you talk to any normal business person, they say, yeah, you know, the goal isn't to break things and fix them later, right? There's no like business. You shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes, but this idea that you just go in and break a bunch of stuff and worry about it later is not a rational way to really do most anything. And it's certainly an irrational way to deal with the Pentagon, deal with the education department. I mean, you know, not to sit here and pick at a scab, but, you know, we're dismantling the Department of Education. Fine. You want to have local control. Our public school system is a disaster around the country. Are there better systems in some places? You know, the crown jewel arguably is the Massachusetts public education system. Me just saying that right now, I'm sure you're going to get a whole bunch of people going, oh yeah, let me tell you how bad it is.
Including Marjorie.
But right. No, but when you look at comparatives to the other 49
That's
states.
true. That is true.
My line is, hey, you guys don't realize how good you have it. But we have a real crisis in that we've basically we have a learning crisis. Okay, you want to dismantle the Department of Education. Do you have any education policy? Do you have a policy? Does he have it? Does he at all want Americans to get smarter, to get brighter, to get this? Like, doesn't seem to be the case. So it's you know, these are solutions to problems that he and MAGA have manufactured over the last few years. And the Department of Education is one of those, quote, problems that doesn't actually exist, but it's been manufactured that way for so long because the right has this bizarre belief that the Department of Education is just there to indoctrinate our students to the left. They don't have enough funding to indoctrinate themselves into an agency, so I don't know why they get so afraid of this stuff. But.
Can we stay on the education department thing for a minute? Not so much because of the content of what they do, but because yet again, the usurpation of the authority, exclusive authority of Congress to get rid of the education department if they wanted to, as opposed to Trump. And his way is you essentially starve it, and then you've, in quotes, gotten rid of it. I think I saw, did you retweet something about an anonymous member of Congress upset about impeachment and the whole notion? And the reason I think you retweeted it was, how pathetic is it that they can't even speak on the record that they're upset about? Well, is there going to come a moment this is a Nostradamus question, I guess. Is there going to come a moment when Republican leaders in Congress say, enough already? This is our job to do this, and we'd probably do it if you wanted us to, but let us do our job. Don't embarrass us like this. Or do they just not give a damn because they're too scared of him?
Well, we have seen the first public on-the-record pushback of a pair of congressional leaders. It's the chairs of the Senate Armed Services and the House Armed Services who went public with a joint statement saying that if, there's this idea the Pentagon wants to basically withdraw from command positions, including in NATO and Japan, and they finally, they did exactly, because you're asking the question that we're all wondering is there going to be some issue, something that actually gets a Republican to go on the record to say, stop, this is Congress's authority. And that's what happened last night, is that you had Roger Wicker, a Mississippi senator, and Mike Rogers, an Alabama congressman, both Republicans, both chair their committees, and said, hey, this has to go through Congress before you can't make these decisions on your own. The idea that the supreme allied commander of NATO forces is no longer going to be an American general. We pay for 2/3 of NATO. Now, obviously, this is, to me, signaling that Trump intends to pull out of NATO. And that should be the larger concern. I mean, pulling out of NATO is essentially surrendering Europe to Russia.
Yeah, and it's switching sides in a way that is very distressing to people. We have a little sound actually from Lisa Murkowski, who's an Alaska senator and a Republican, who often has bucked the trend with Donald Trump. And she's talking about, at this Alaska state capitol meeting, people being afraid to speak out against Trump or Musk. Here she is.
That's why you've got everybody just like zip lip, not saying a word. Because they're afraid they're going to be taken down, they're going to be primaried, they're going to be given names in the media. You know what? We cannot be cowed into not speaking up.
Oh yes, you can actually. You can be cowed into not.
How about
speaking
that guy? I mean, there's only one other person, but that Tom Massey, I read about him from Kentucky. Massey, who says that Canada's going to give in before he will to what goes on. I mean, they're few and far between, obviously, but I don't know.
Yeah, look, it's funny. Why is Murkowski comfortable? Because she's already succeeded in she's been targeted and she's won, right?
Yeah.
So she feels more bulletproof, right? She feels like she's got more scar tissue, and I do think it begins with people like her. If Susan Collins really is running for re-election, she needs to get tougher and stronger here. I give her credit. She saved DC's budget, and she really did. I mean, they're gonna make that fix so that DC doesn't have to lay off cops and teachers and stuff. So there is some things that some of these folks are doing, but when the ones who have successfully won, by promising that they're willing to speak up, Don Bacon in Omaha, Lisa Murkowski, they have to be at the tip of the spear if they're going to encourage others to come out. Right. And what's been disappointing to me is how few have you see Don Bacon is doing less and saying less. It's like they all are right now. Now, I also would like to remind people we're not even at 60 days.
Yeah.
Okay, we are not even at 60 days of this presidency. And if I read one more story about whether there's a blue wave developing yet, or whether J.D. Vance is the heir apparent in 28, I literally want to just, all of that, this is how you realize that a lot more news coverage is driven by algorithms than anything. There is no actionable reason to write a story about whether a blue wave is developing 15 months from now, or whether J.D. Vance is the heir apparent in 2028. Like there's no trigger, there's no hook. All that is literally manufactured content in order to get attention. And I guess what's pathetic is that's how the algorithms are rewarding stupid stories like that. Because guess what? It is, all of that stuff's irrelevant right now. The politics of right now will have an impact on how people potentially react by November of 2026 or even January of 2028. But good grief, we're not at 60 days yet. Let's calm down.
I don't know if we're going to
Okay,
make it to the midterms at the rate we're going.
I don't know
think
if we're
we
going to
have
make
a
it to 70 days, much less the
national
midterm.
nervous breakdown.
So, Chuck Todd, since you've obviously embarrassed us into not talking about the blue wave, let's talk about the blue trickle, if we can, for a second here. So, Chuck Schumer, after every member of the House on the Democratic side votes against this spending thing to get us through September, except Jared Golden from Maine, Chuck Schumer, as everybody knows, the Democratic leader in the Senate, votes for this thing and brings enough Democrats along to make it happen. And while he was criticized by people like Ocasio-Cortez, Nancy Pelosi, who's in this senior guard like Schumer is, says, talk about a criticism, I don't give away anything for nothing. The point obviously being you did. Chuck, is there going to be a changing of the guard, even if there's no wave of any sort?
You know, it's interesting you say. I don't know why. Well, I know why Schumer wants to stay as leader, because I don't think he has anything else in his life, right? And I say that these senators, you see them: Lindsey Graham, Dick Durbin, Chuck Schumer, Chuck Grassley.
Exactly.
You know, right? You're like, guys, do you have anything going on in your life? Do you have grandkids? Do you have kids? Do you want to, do you have hobbies?
Yeah, pickleball.
Right, do something. When you think about what was the biggest criticism really of the Democrats in the last election, it was just sort of how stale their leadership had become, right? And look, Pelosi has kind of stepped away. She at least stepped down from her formal post. Biden is not there. It was odd to me that Schumer decided to stick around.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think Democrats made a mistake. I think they need, whether it's Michael Bennett, whether it's Amy Klobuchar, I can come up with 3 or 4 others who might be just sort of could meet the moment. And Schumer has been a really successful politician, and I get it. They never know when to leave the stage, but you got to know when to go. Look, this is a case where Schumer ended up he did what he had to do, but how he went about it was poorly executed, right? And I think that's what Pelosi, I think's criticism was coming at. It's sort of like, ultimately the strategy was daring the House Republicans to unite enough to pass it, something they'd never done before. Well, they did it. And once they did it, that was the leverage Democrats thought they had. They didn't imagine that only Massey would bail on them and everybody else stuck by it. And so they thought they were going to that House Republicans were going to be forced to deal with House Democrats. And when that went away, there was no plan B. Now, is that on Schumer, not to a failure of imagination? It's like, hey, maybe Trump will be able to unite the House Republicans behind him. And sure enough, he did. So I do fault Schumer for not having a plan B. I don't fault him for the decision he made, but I fault him for his bad communication, where one day he's going to stop it, the next day he backs off, when they clearly didn't have a plan B, and they didn't. It's a failure of imagination. They didn't believe just because something hasn't happened before in the Trump era doesn't mean it won't happen. And that is one of the biggest mistakes we all make when it comes to this era of politics.
Can we get back to what you said a minute ago? Because I think about it a lot. Marjorie and I talk about it a lot, probably more off air than on. They really do have nothing except this. So many of these people. When you see a young politician, and young these days, 55 years old, 58 years
Chris
old.
Murphy.
Right.
Chris Murphy is considered young.
No, I didn't mean young and
He's younger
staying.
than you and I, but he's like, wow.
I've been
that's
somebody
young.
who actually decides to leave, not a Chris Murphy, and they're only, in quotes, 58 or 60, because they do want a different life. They don't want to just rot in these chambers.
Right.
You feel like, what a wonderful human being that actually cares about
But Chuck Schumer's been a professional politician, and I mean that that's just what he is. He ran for the state assembly, then he ran for Congress, then he ran for Senate. This is what he's done for 50 years. So he doesn't know another life, right? And he's not alone. Chuck Grassley did the same thing. These are career politicians. That they actually are the very definition of it. And I do think whoever they were privately sort of goes away the longer they stay in office. And so then it becomes who they are in public is who they are. Look, I'm going to be honest. I was getting concerned that my identity was too wrapped up in my public stuff. And I didn't like that feeling. And I was just a member of the press. I can't, elected officials are in a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, but can I tell you one last thing? I think it's not only because they have nothing else. I used to be a lobbyist, and I use the term loosely, not just in Washington, but at the State House here. When you see these backbenchers from blank community who have their constituents and other lobbyists refer to them almost as Your Excellency, and their chests swell up, it's also that power that doesn't exist in the real world.
It's intoxicating,
It really is.
Some of these guys, it's the best job they're ever going to get.
That is true. That is true. We're talking to Chuck Todd.
I used to say that John Boehner, if he didn't succeed in Congress, probably would have been a really good insurance salesman. And I don't mean that as a critique.
I know you don't.
But he wasn't going to be the CEO of some Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
But he had the gift of gab, right? He was just sort of and by the way, it's sort of like a gift of gab. You can be a real estate agent or you go into Congress. And the congressional career is probably more intoxicating.
No.
Oh, I saw that guy, Scaramucci, that lasted 11 days working for Trump. He was the brief spokesman in turn number one, talking about how, why do these people do this? Why do they sell their soul? And he was saying, well, it's really intoxicating to ride on Air Force One with the president and sit up there and chat with him. And it's the power kind of thing and the closeness to power. And I guess that sort of makes sense. But may I ask you something? I know you don't want to talk about the blue wave, but it seems to me Democrats might be drowning here in like getting squeezed on every side. And there's this great New York Times piece that's talking about going after these Democratic law firms, these powerful law firms in D.C. because they did outrageous things like represent Hillary Clinton and her, when she was running against Trump, and then represent Jack Smith, the prosecutor that was going after Trump. They're going after Democratic fundraising and ominous suggestions that nonprofits aligned with Democrats or critical of Trump could have their tax exemptions revoked. And we had this with law firms in Boston. They're going after them, asking for names and phone numbers and addresses of employees. I mean, really wild and crazy stuff. So there's this, and the point, by the way, which I should mention, is that the hope is to hobble the Dems' ability to compete in elections, as the Times put it, for years to come. That's a little scary for the Democrats.
Well, look, this has been a 50-year campaign, right? It began, there's always been these efforts, and both parties attempted in different ways to try to, when they're in power, hey, maybe we can weaken the other side if we do X or we do Y. So, for instance, I remembered in the early 90s when Republicans got control of the state houses, what they decided to do is, hey, let's starve trial lawyers. Trial lawyers are the biggest donors to the Democrats, and if we can limit how much money they can make, by putting caps and medical malpractice caps, all of that was never designed to protect anybody other than to starve Democrats of donations. The attempt to curtail collective bargaining power for labor unions, right, in Wisconsin back in 2010, when Scott Walker went about that was not about workers' rights. That was about weakening the Democratic Party. So it's not a new phenomenon. What I will admit to be underestimating is there is a revenge aspect to Trump and all of his allies that I think is even deeper than just legal vengeance. The mainstream left did do everything they could to prevent anybody that worked for Trump or supported Trump to be on corporate boards, to keep them from getting speeches, to keep them from being hired in places. And so this bitterness at not being able to get work in 2019 and 2020, and sort of you left Trump and there was nothing available, no law firm would hire the lawyers, no all of this, right? So this is a revenge. And you do have a whole bunch of Trump folks who are like, there's almost like there's a rage in Trump world that is about, it's almost less about dismantling the Democratic Party, but making them feel the same pain that many of the Trump folks felt in the first term. And then in that period of exile where they couldn't get work. And, this is something that I think the left, look, the Democratic goal was they thought if they could purge Trump folks and create a penalty for working for Trump, that it would limit the people that would go to him. Well, it didn't work. Yep. And now you have a bunch of super angry folks who have decided what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So they're going to now try to do essentially the same thing they believe that happened to them. They're trying to inflict the same type of pain on the left. And that's why the law firms are being targeted.
Well, so maybe I'm mistaken then, Chuck, because I didn't really know about people going after the nonprofits trying to take away their tax exemptions from the Democrats or Republicans. But maybe I just missed it. I mean, was it that extreme?
No, it was not. That's my point. It wasn't, like every revenge that MAGA does that's projecting due to something that they believe the left did to them, the reaction is like 10x to what actually
can I get into this, though? There's another reason for this. It's not just because they did it, and so we're going to do it even better. It's when it was done to Republicans, they fought. The response to this targeting by most who are being targeted. What did the University of Pennsylvania say yesterday when the $175 million cut? We're in full compliance with NCAA regulations on athletes. What has Columbia said about their $400 million?
They're all on bended knee.
What do all these law firms say? Nothing. No comment. That nobody knows how to fight, with the exception of a small handful of people and organizations. They're easy picking. What?
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And I think this is my critique of the legacy media organizations who have also been surrendering and who have been telling their correspondents not to ask tough questions because they don't want to create viral moments with Trump.
Is that true? Wait.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Like who?
Yes, it is.
Like who?
Well, I know you're not going to tell us who, but tell us the content. It's the concern about being targeted, and I talk to plenty of correspondents, and the pressure they're feeling from their bosses not to create a moment, and then of course it becomes self-fulfilling pressure because you're intimidated, you're bullied on social media, some of these reporters as well, but you can feel the chill in there. And look, I do think Trump's goal is to make as many of these organizations to discredit them as best he can. Because again, at his core, he believes that's what everybody was trying to do to him. Trying to cancel and discredit him. And instead of sort of taking Donald Trump, he couldn't find the high road on a map of high roads. Okay, there's no such thing as that. He never takes the high road. It is always the low road, and he's going super low.
Super low.
I do believe eventually people do get tired of being. You keep punching that kid, and then one day he shows up and armed
or he
to
dies.
The teeth, right? It is. I do think it's a problem that the Democrats haven't figured out how to channel the rage that is building and be the responsible. They're also thought to be the grown-ups in the room. And I think that's the problem is you have about some of the party thinks they have to be the grown-ups in the room. And some of the party is going, that's gotten us nowhere. Being the grown-up has only gotten us more lost elections. Maybe it's time to fight fire with fire. It's always been a fear I've had. We've talked about this before. I don't know if everybody goes low, we're going to wish somebody was going high.
Before you go away, I want to spend one more minute on this reporters basically some reporters being instructed to go a little lighter. Marty Barron was with us yesterday. Again. Was he yesterday? No, day before yesterday. And I had we had the same discussion with him we had a few months ago. The Ruth Marcus thing obviously happened since we saw Marty last, the columnist who quit after 41 years because they spiked her column about the new editorial page policy. And I said to Marty the same thing I said to him last month, which is, why are you convinced that this censorship, for lack of a better expression, is not seeping into the news pages? And he said he had, he still talks to a lot of reporters like you do too. And I cited the example Marcus in her piece in the New Yorker made, to her credit, said that she wrote two columns, the one that was spiked and another one, in which she held back some things about Bezos in an attempt to get them published. So when you combine that with what you're saying, why should the consumer of mainstream news not fear that they're not, to use a double negative, not getting the whole story anymore?
Because they're not. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, this is why I hate. I mean, it is the journalists practicing journalism without fear or favor is mostly now happening on an independent level, and of course, the access that independent journalists can get can be somewhat limited, but there's no doubt that the legacy media, because access is so important, particularly in certain beats in Washington, they're all kowtowing, and they're all sort of, and it's rounding the edges, right? It's not it's the every individual case is defensible, okay? But when you see it collectively, you just did a good job of putting it into the big picture terms. There's just we're now in the point of self-censorship, right? And it has happened because of a combination of public bullying, presidential bullying, and corporate kowtowing.
Well, Matt, you look like you're going to play golf. Are you going to play golf right now?
No, I wish I was. This is NCAA Thursday. I really should be doing that, but no. Now I'm about to meet with a student. I just have a crazy errand day.
Okay.
Enjoy
driving
it.
around.
I love errands, by the way. Chuck, it's great to see you.
I hope the judges can stand up.
See you soon.
We'll
Bye,
see.
guys.
Thank you very much, Chuck
Take care.
Todd. That was sobering, very sobering.
Well, I mean, I'm happy and sad to hear him say that about the press. Self-censorship. I mean, Ruth Marcus admittedly in columns, but still.
But I gotta say, when I'm looking at even the Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch, they're still doing very tough stories.
How do you know what they're
Trump.
not saying?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what they're not saying. But I certainly hope that they're not kowtowing as much as he says they are. But maybe they are. So our only hope is the judges, who are now getting bomb threats and death threats.
Only hope. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. That's my philosophy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The only hope.
Yeah, okay. I'll be under the desk. You can find me later.
I'll be under there with you.
Okay. We were speaking with political analyst Chuck Todd. This is a pretty sturdy desk, actually. It
is.
I think suit me well.
I can actually fit under.
We can fit lots of people under here. We can have the whole staff.
Oh, there are a lot of people under there already, actually. Okay, Marjorie, let's do this.
We're speaking with political analyst Chuck Todd, host of the Chuck Toddcast. He's a political analyst and foreign moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. After a quick break, we're opening the phones and text lines. Another uplifting story. The 2025 World Happiness Report is out. And guess what? The United States has dropped to its lowest point ever. And that was before Donald Trump came into office for time number 2. Does that line up with how you're feeling? And you know who's the most unhappy? The young kids, people under 30 years old. Okay, call or text us next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, a portal to the divine, wading through the imagination of Haitian-born artist Fabiola Jean-Louis by way of her solo exhibition at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, Waters of the Abyss. Plus, Boston, get ready to get down. The famed Alvin Ailey Dance Company is coming to town with a handful of free community events, teaching Bostonians their iconic moves. That and more today at 2 on The Culture Show on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Turkish Airlines, flying to over 300 destinations worldwide, including Athens, Seoul, Mumbai, and more. A complete list of destinations and more information is available at turkishairlines.com. And the Bach Center, presenting Riverdance 30, The New Generation, a special anniversary tour, playing April 8th through the 13th at the Bach Center Wang Theater. Tickets at bachcenter.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow with some fabulous music, great guests, Nancy Gertner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, and Sue O'Connell's back. We haven't seen her in a
Our
while.
media
Really
maven.
excited.
Yes, we're very excited.
So every year, when did this start? Was it 15 years ago? Whatever it was, I can't remember. We get a World Happiness Report from Gallup where they rank all the countries in the world, I think it's 140, based on their average level of social connections, people's life satisfaction, etc. Shocking to no one, thanks to a host of factors we'll talk about, America is at its lowest spot ever, number 24. We're below the obvious ones, the Scandinavian countries like Finland and Denmark where they practice hygge. But we're also Not gonna. I shouldn't have done that. We're not going to do that. But we're also lower than Lithuania, lower than Israel,
Lower than Lithuania.
lower than Melania Trump's homeland of Slovenia. And by the way, this is key. Marjorie said this a second ago. All this, the data that was collected was prior
to Trump. That's
coming
right.
back for a second term. So the phone and text lines are open at 877-301-8970. Does this low ranking match how you feel as someone living in the U.S.? Importantly, this is not just about politics, though politics does spill into everything, I guess. It's also how we interact with one another as a community, how we perceive our own ability to live freely and happily. And does hearing this news make you want to reach out to a friend, for example, you haven't talked to a while, or move to Slovenia, wherever that is? 877-301-8970. This is really sobering.
I know.
This number is like a precipitous drop for the country.
Scandinavian countries always do really well. And they interviewed someone in Finland who said their democracy is functioning well. Quite a well-functioning society, very strong welfare system.
Social welfare state, right.
Social welfare state, parental
Take
leave,
care of their people.
unemployments, mostly universal health care. You're not worried that you can't afford to go to the doctors, you can't afford your prescriptions, you can't afford college, you can't afford the rent, you can't afford childcare, you can't
Can I
afford
add one
anything.
thing to this before you... Oh, go ahead.
I want to talk about the poor people, the Gen Zers.
That's what I was going to do. Do it.
You know, so they can't afford anything because everything has become so expensive.
No, but mention the survey thing here. Oh, do you want me to do it?
Which survey?
In the survey, if Gallup had only talked to people under, I just told you we're 24th. Was it 24th? Yeah, 24th in the world in terms of the happiness quotient, lowest we've ever been. If Gallup had just spoken to people in this country under 30, we wouldn't have even made the top 60 countries in the world. Is that incredible and horrifying?
Well, Business Insider had a fascinating analysis of why young people are so upset, and they're talking about the rejection now online. They interviewed this kid who applied for 400 jobs online after she got out of college. This was in 2020, and she was rejected by every single one. So she doesn't have any money. She's worried about the COVID-19 impact. She's worried about the climate. She's worried. This is after Trump. Worried about the Trump administration. They talk about rejection in the dating world. Listen to this quote. A typical Zoomer on the dating apps may be getting rejected by more prospective partners in 1 week than a typical baby boomer was rejected in their entire life. Because obviously baby boomers like us, Jim, were not on dating apps. You went to school or you went to college or maybe you went to bar. You met people not
in a
online.
real world.
And
You're going to
so
mention the eating alone thing too?
the eating alone is
But is
another
that a
huge
cause
thing.
or an effect? They say that they talk about how 1 in 4 people eat alone in this country. Obviously, loneliness is an issue. But I wasn't clear if they were saying that's why we're so unhappy or because we're so unhappy, that's why we're eating alone. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know. I think this gets back to the loneliness epidemic, that more and more people are living alone, and people are get lonely, obviously, if they may be living alone. 877-301-8970. I'm particularly interested in what people think about people under 30. If you are under 30 yourself, if you've got kids at that age, they talk about on the dating sites all this ghosting, that you have a date or two with somebody, you get rejected out of hand, or you have a date or two and then the person disappears. I mean, they can't even text you and say, thanks, didn't work out or whatever. The person just disappears, which is really, really, really depressing.
And one of the other things, by the way, I know that the logic convinces nobody of anything anymore. But when you were talking about the Scandinavian countries, which are always high there, the central thing is twofold. One, apparently being outside is a huge thing.
They love nature.
Lakes and nature, but that's not my thing so much. But the thing that is my thing, so to speak, is the social welfare state. Yes, they pay much higher in taxes, but their government provides for their needs. Our government provides for fewer and fewer of our needs. Obviously, that's why, because we don't have our needs met, we're so unhappy, and that's why they're so happy. So maybe one person in America, maybe it's Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or somebody, is going to say, well, maybe we have to own up to the fact that since we can't satisfy a lot of our needs, maybe a government that we didn't trash all the time could fill more of them. As you said, maybe it's child care, maybe it's elder care, whatever the hell it is. But that's why these countries are the happiest countries year after year after year.
Yeah, and when you think about the prospective cuts to Medicaid, which is what funds a lot of older people that wind up in nursing homes.
Yeah.
I mean,
they'll be happy. They'll be happy on the side of the road.
Exactly.
Oh, Grandma's on 93 South. Where is she? On the exit 11.
I mean, I'm looking forward to the granny flat myself, but that assumes that one of my children will have to allow me to have the granny flat in the backyard. I could be out of luck. And on 93 South.
What are you laughing? What is?
I don't know.
We're screwed. I mean,
I don't know.
Okay, so
It's
we're the
not
least
funny.
happy we've ever been since Gallup started doing this happiness survey. And again, it's pre-Trump, so for a few minutes at least, we're not going to say Trump is the cause of all things bad. Obviously, there are some other things. What are you laughing about?
Ingrid is Reville. She's got the right attitude.
What'd she say?
She says, are you surprised? Gun violence, inequality. She doesn't think much of the schools, massive wealth in disparity. Who would want to live here?
Yeah. Any case,
she's not happy.
She's not happy. Are you guys happy? We want to know. And are you? I mean, is your unhappiness or your level of happiness contributing to the decline of our ranking in the world?
In the United States of America. Now,
What's
Jim,
happening in Slovenia? That is, I don't mean to be anti-Slovenian.
Mexico. They're way ahead of us.
I know they are.
They're like number 10.
Yeah.
Mexico, that we're talking about cartels and murders all the time.
Yeah.
Apparently they're coping
That makes
with
a lot of
those.
people happy down there, yeah. John in Wakefield, you are first, I guess, on Boston Public Radio. Hi.
Hey, guys. I just wanted to say that based on my cursory reading of what had just come out, that it looks like measures of optimism are down everywhere, though, not just like our ranking fell relative to others, but that measures of pessimism are up everywhere. And I would argue that some of this is just connected to the internet, which I think is a machine for sort of distrust and despair.
That may be a fine point.
See the numbers. That's why young people, which suffered more in terms of loneliness, according to the survey, are so at risk. That's why they're so much less happy in part.
You're a genius.
Because they spend more time online.
I totally agree with you, and I wish we had thought of that. I totally agree with your analysis. What do you think of that? It's because of online presence, omnipresence.
It's a big problem. I think people being addicted to their phones, and talk about how when you look at a cafeteria now in a high school, so many of the kids are just sitting there looking at their phones and not even talking to people.
John, that was a great first call. First for this segment. By the way, Lydia, can we have one positive thing because it's so negative? Read Lydia.
Lydia in Grafton
What'd she say?
says,
This is true.
It will all improve when the ground round reopens in Shrewsbury.
I agree with that, by the way. There's nothing, if like a ground round opens near you.
Fond memories of the ground round. I don't know if they'll still do it in Shrewsbury, but the deal is when your kids were little, you could
free
go in
popcorn.
There. Well, you paid as much as they weighed. So if you had if you had like a 3 or 4 year old, you're paying like 30 cents for the cheeseburger and the French fries and the little clown sundae they would make in a little cup with the
you know what the
smiley
problem
face.
was? They had that in Philadelphia, and as soon as they started charging it based on what your kid weighed, my mother couldn't afford to take me out to dinner anymore. That's true. That's sort of true. Anyway, it's a rather heavy child. I was.
They had to roll him to school.
No, let's not
That
do
was
that.
Jim told me that. I felt bad.
Roll me back too.
That's
so
right.
I got home fine.
Roll to and from.
Okay, Arthur
in Marblehead. Thank you for calling.
Talking about happiness. Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
Hi.
I guess two things. I wanted to share perspective. I graduated college in the middle 70s, which was a very bad time for the economy. 20% interest rates, no jobs, blah, blah, blah. And that was an extremely struggling time. Now, in the current situation, I've just been given notice that my apartment house has been sold and they're going to condo it, so we all got to move.
Aye.
So at my age, out there, sort of struggling by myself, looking for a new place to live, and wherever I call, as soon as they ask me, how old are you? And I tell them, click. So the real issue is you can't control what happens. You can only control how you respond to it. I think if people took a little more investment into that approach, they'd be less lonely. If you're lonely, you got to do something about it.
Yeah, but in all fairness, Arthur, well, on the surface, I think I agree with you. Sometimes it's paralyzing, and we've talked a lot about it on the show. We've read a lot about it. You probably know there's actually something of loneliness, a cabinet or a department of loneliness in the UK, because it's more than just, like pull up your bootstraps and deal with it. But having said that, thank you for your call. We appreciate
Arthur,
it.
I think also touches on a great point, the uncertainty of where you're going to live. If you have been living in a place for a long time and all of a sudden the building's sold and then you have to find a new place to live and at great expense. I mean, rents are so ridiculously high now. It's a problem.
Well, by the way, the unaffordability crisis, again, the Scandinavian countries address that to a degree. Yes, you pay a lot more in taxes, but a lot more is provided.
Imagine that. Think about if you did not have to worry about your health care, if you did not have to worry about going broke.
How many Western nations do you need to worry about your health care besides the United States?
None.
None.
Lucy in Worcester says, all I can say is that at this point, the only way for me to be sane and happy is if Massachusetts secedes to Canada or I get a lobotomy.
877-301-8970 is the number. Anonymous texter, I'm turning 40 this year. Most of the reasons I'm unhappy can be traced to capitalism. I can't afford a house anywhere near my job, and apartment living is not conducive to gardening, which many experts say is beneficial to mental health. Let me interrupt and say, again, when you talk about the Scandinavian countries, it's access to nature and the outside that is a huge thing. And this anonymous texter continues, high cost of living means local friends. This is a great text. High cost of living means local friends are moving more often, so loneliness abounds for many of us. That was really terrific. Thank you.
I think, we used to talk about this like years ago. Remember that Thomas Piketty's book about regulated capitalism?
Yeah, was it Piketty?
I mean, that's what he's talking about.
Pinckney, yeah.
I mean, capitalism can make a lot of people very wealthy, but it needs to be regulated, and we have been sort of a free-for-all since Ronald Reagan became the president and kind of
take a break.
Changed a lot of things. Okay, we're talking about the misery index for the United States.
It's not the misery index.
Well,
I guess it is the misery index.
We're pretty miserable here. I mean, all these other countries are ahead. Mexico is ahead of us.
By the way, that's not an anti-Mexico comment.
No, it's
but
just
I'm with you. When
we
you
have these
so
horrible
much,
reports
exactly.
about Mexico getting derided by the president, and it seems that somehow they're a lot happier than we are. Twice as happy, anyway. Okay, we're talking about this very problem and how people under 30 are the least happy of all. 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio. 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Four years ago in Myanmar, the COVID pandemic took a backseat in the public consciousness because a civil war was erupting.
Everybody's concerns about dying from COVID quickly evaporated about being shot on the streets.
We speak with explorer Paul Salopek about navigating the lockdown in Myanmar during a time of conflict. That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Advocates, the human services provider helping individuals facing mental health, substance use, and other life challenges, is now hiring clinicians. Learn more about their supportive culture and open positions at advocates.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan, Jim Browdy, streaming youtube.com/GBH News, live at the Library tomorrow. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the new Gallup survey of 140 nations around the world, the Happiness Report, World Happiness Report. We in the United States rank the lowest ever. We're 24th ever for us. And as Marjorie has said a couple of times, if they had only surveyed those under 30 in the United States, we would not even have made the top 60 happiest countries. The number is 877-301-8970.
Let's go to Cooper in Cambridge. Thank you for calling, Cooper.
Hi, Cooper.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure.
First-time listener, long-time caller. So.
Thank you.
Anyway, so...
that was a good one. Marjorie missed that. I love that. Go ahead, Cooper.
I got it.
Go ahead.
So I'm calling because I'm 23, and I moved here last May because I lived in a suburb of a southern city, Columbia, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And moving up here, I was like, you know what? It's a new city. It's small enough that I can find community. And I think I have. I'm pretty social, all things considered. So I have an easier time reaching out to people. But a lot of my more introverted friends seem to have a really hard time and think Boston's a pretty cold place. So I definitely think that, a lot of people do think that maybe it's just, I mean, I know this is a U.S. survey, obviously the happiness survey, but I know that Boston specifically, I found really good communities here. So I definitely think there is a wide breadth. And if you're taking into account the rural areas, like where I'm from, like I definitely think people are a lot more lonely when they're farther apart. It's just it's hard to get together, especially at our age.
Cooper, what do you think of...
And there's a lack of... Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think there's a lack of third places too.
That's a wonderful
point.
And then we have people's houses, right? And I'm one to host. I've always been a hoster, and that's why I've, had so many close acquaintances or friends or been generally social. But, a lot of people can't go to the mall anymore, or they, without being run out by police or like stuff like that, for juvenile, trespassing or whatever you want to call it. And I just think it's sad that we don't have that much anymore, and it's just getting more out of style to do that as well.
That's a wonderful point.
Also, a lot of people your age, Cooper, a lot of older people too, but they're working from home a lot too. But when you say third place, do you mean like a coffee shop?
Not work, not home.
You mean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not work, not home, and a place specifically that you don't need to pay to get into.
Exactly.
Like a coffee shop, a lot of them, especially if you're going local, you got to buy something. I mean, that's just a nice thing to do. You're supporting the business, but not everyone has $5 to spend every day to see your friend. Like, why do you have to pay $5 to see your friend? I feel like that's a little absurd,
Hey, Cooper,
But,
that was a hell of a call.
Yeah.
Give us another one soon. That was a really fine call. Thank you for making it. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk soon.
So, absolutely. I should have mentioned that before, that working from home, I think, has made a lot of a
You're
lot of
singing
people.
my song.
Because especially if you're young and you come here from someplace else, how do you meet people if you're not in the office?
Can I read a couple of texts here? Anonymous says, all this time I thought I was happy. Thanks a lot. Now I'm miserable. That's the effect that we have on people. And Jeremy in Gloucester says this, I'm 39. I haven't had a primary care doctor or a dentist since I was 26. I graduated into the recession in 2008. I've struggled to find a decent job. Every career change I make leads to a different insurance, if it's insurance provided at all. I'm about to start paying $150 a week just to be insured, and I'm not earning enough to actually afford the medication I need. Boy, that is really encapsulates a nightmare of a lot of people in this country. Jeremy, thanks for writing that. Boy.
Okay, you were joking about our being behind Lithuania. We have
Slovenia. Maybe Lithuania too. Yeah.
And a texter just says, don't laugh at Lithuania. They're the happiest country for people under 30. I'm of Lithuanian descent, although I have citizenship, and I have citizenship there. But once Trump and Putin divide the world, Lithuania is going back to the USSR. So please let us have our 15 minutes of fun and glory.
I looked up, by the way, why Slovenia is higher than us. That's where Melania Trump's from. They're happy due to several factors, says the AI part of Google. High quality of life is one. Safety, that's huge. Beautiful natural surroundings, that's 3. You know what number 4 is? It's not the United States. That's that one is not part of it.
I mean, there's a clear common denominator.
What's that?
Well, if you are not worried about where you're going to live, if you're not worried about how you're going to pay for your health care, if you have a baby and you get some support so you can stay home for a while, if you get ill and you can get unemployment.
High quality of life.
Yeah, and that's what everybody's complaining about here, right? They can't afford to live here anymore.
And that's why, Maura Healey, what's the word that is in every single sentence she says, not only on our show, but everywhere? Affordability. That is that is at the center of unaffordability, at the center of everything,
and
including
as I've said a million
unhappiness.
times, we talk about it, but we're really slow at fixing it. Robin in Watertown, thank you for calling.
Hello, Robin.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent, sort of. Go ahead.
Yeah, as long as you don't think about what's going on
exactly
in the world.
Right. That's what happened. Go ahead.
So I'm calling because I live here. My daughter lives in Denmark. She's here for grad school, and she's
And
she's able to. She has never been happier. I mean, never, ever, ever been happier.
Why?
Well, a bunch of reasons. She could afford to live. She never learned to drive. She grew up in Watertown, didn't want to drive in Boston. She takes her bike everywhere. Yeah. She takes public transit. She could come home late. It feels safe. She's met great people. it's just so easy to go out to do things.
Wow.
You know, the caller before was saying you have to pay $5 to see your friends. There's just a lot of social spaces where you can meet people. You know, and this is someone who always hated winter here. She's fine with the days that are about 3 hours long.
That's pretty interesting. Hey, you know, Robin, do you know what they practice in Denmark?
Hygge?
Hygge, that is exactly right.
Would
It
you
is a
explain
Danish.
what it is?
Has your
please?
daughter said anything about it or no?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of joke about it, but you know, a couple of weeks ago, her roommate was like, "This winter's getting long. Let's have a dinner party." And I said to her, "Well, you're going to have candles," and she's like, "Of course we're going to have candles." You know, it's just they find joy in smaller things.
That's
I
great.
think.
That was great. That was great. Hey, if your daughter ever is listening, we'd love her to call in. We're online, so love to hear about her life in Denmark. Robin, thanks for the call. That was excellent. We appreciate that.
Okay, somebody
Hygge
said-
is this Danish concept.
Yes.
You feel cozy,
Cozy.
warm, you know, a candle thing,
Yep.
cozy meal, with sense of well-being, that sort of thing. Go ahead.
Somebody just texted and said their friend's son just married someone from Slovenia. They picked up and moved there with their 2 children, and they're very happy.
Are Slovenia
in
and Slovakia
Slovenia.
different countries?
I don't know. I don't.
What do you mean you don't know?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know.
You don't know?
Somebody else says we are unhappy because all these billionaires are deciding we should suffer, and we don't fight back.
Well, we don't fight back. That is totally true. We
Yeah.
do not fight back in this country anymore.
Okay.
That is really true. Angel and Lynn,
Oh, the
welcome
wealth
to-
gap. Lots of people are talking about that.
Yep.
I wonder if Scandinavian countries have a wealth gap much smaller than the United
Great
States.
question.
Yes, they do.
Angel and Lynn, hello.
Hey, how you doing, Jim and Marjorie?
Hey,
Fine,
Angel,
thank
how
you.
are you?
Good, good. Well, I wish that we were all collectively doing better,
Yeah.
according to the reports.
Yeah.
But I have an interesting perspective, being that I am an adult, non-traditional student at Salem State University.
Yep.
And what I've noticed in my time, I'm a senior, by the way, and I've spent the last couple of years on campus observing the younger folks. I have adult children, and what I've noticed is that the internet has really created this situation in where people are measuring themselves on a constant basis on other people's lives relative to others. And I think this constant updating and refreshing, if you will, on how you measure up with the Joneses has caused an impasse on people making progress on their own personal happiness, let alone their involvement civically. And, you know, it's only been now recently that I've been participating in philosophy courses that we're actually taking a course called Philosophy of Happiness, in which we're exploring all these different ideas about different philosophers, going back to the ancients, Aristotle and his ideas and Plato's ideas, and some of your more contemporary philosophers. And
hey,
I can only say
30 seconds.
I can only say in ending is that people really need to stop being so relative about what their lives are measured to others. And I think happiness will go from there.
Great analysis. Call us again, Angel. Good luck when you graduate. Congratulations. Thanks so much for your call.
Okay, thank you very much for your calls and your texts. We are moving.
Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Bernadine Sung Megason with Compass Real Estate, serving buyers and sellers throughout Greater Boston. Learn more at homesbybernadine.com. When a young, delusioned doctor leaves the UK, she moves to South India and finds work at an understaffed and overworked hospital. Watch the series premiere of Good Karma Hospital tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 2 of Boston Public Radio. Trump's attacks on all things not white and straight and male come to Boston, as 2 local law firms are in his...
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is expected to move ahead today with his plan to begin dismantling the Department of Education. Details from NPR's Janaki Mehta.
President Trump plans to sign an executive action that will tell Education Secretary Linda McMahon to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education. The move has been expected since early February when the White House shared its intentions, but held off on issuing the action until McMahon was confirmed in her position. The Education Department has already notified nearly half of its staff that they will be laid off. Many of those employees will have their last day of work Friday before being placed on administrative leave. The order also says any programs will not be funded by the department if they, quote, advance DEI or gender ideology. Janaki Mehta, NPR News.
The Pentagon is in the process of restoring some website pages that document the stories of pioneers who broke racial and other historical barriers in defense of these United States. Military veteran and baseball legend Jackie Robinson, Navajo code talkers from World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen. Theirs and other Americans' histories were scrubbed as part of the administration's policy to erase diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and references in federal government. Two defense officials not authorized to speak publicly told NPR the pages were taken down through a review of thousands of stories, photos, and videos. One of the officials said the ongoing review was too hasty in some respects. President Trump argues DEI unfairly promotes racial and gender considerations at the expense of individual merit. However, Trump's critics say DEI initiatives are designed to promote fair representation of historically marginalized communities. The Trump administration's hostage envoy has met with the Taliban in Afghanistan and is returning with an American man who had been held for the past 2.5 years. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports that the Taliban are presenting this as a possible diplomatic opening.
U.S. officials say that Delta Airlines mechanic George Glesman is returning home, joining two other Americans who were released from Afghanistan on the night President Trump was inaugurated. This time, U.S. hostage envoy Adam Bowler and a former U.S. ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad met with the Taliban in Kabul to negotiate the release of a man who they say was a tourist in Afghanistan. Officials say this was not a prisoner swap, and they're calling on the Taliban to release 7 other Americans, including Mahmoud Habibi. He's an Afghan American who had been working in Kabul when the Taliban toppled the U.S.-backed government in 2022. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 186 points, or nearly 0.5%. It's NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. State education leaders are criticizing President Trump's effort to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. From our higher ed desk, GBH's Kirk Carapezza reports they see sweeping cuts to staffing as both counterproductive and deeply problematic.
One of the key roles the department plays in higher education is processing financial aid and student loans. In a statement, Massachusetts Higher Ed Commissioner Noe Ortega says proper staffing at the federal level is crucial to putting college within financial reach for students and families across the country. Ortega is also concerned the move will have a chilling effect on enrollment rates and FAFSA completion. Last week, Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell filed a lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's plan to dismantle the department. Kirk Carapezza, GBH News, 89.7.
Don't look now, but the Boston Public Library is 171 years old today. It was on this day in 1854. The first BPL building opened repurposing a former schoolhouse on Mason Street in Boston, just off Tremont, near the Boston Common. Axios Boston says that by then the library had already amassed 16,000 volumes and quickly outgrew the space. Well, today, the BPL holds more than 23 million items, estimated to be among the 3 largest collections of books, maps, manuscripts, letters, and drawings in the country, with works dating back as early as the 10th century. So, on behalf of all of us here at GBH, happy birthday, BPL. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, committed to giving job listings increased visibility with relevant candidates through its sponsored jobs feature. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with Live Music Friday featuring Cuban-born pianist Zili Zamora and also retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, plus media maven Sue O'Connell. We miss her. She's going to be back. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Here with us now over Zoom is former Suffolk County Sheriff, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who, of course, joins us weekly. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Jim. Hello, Marjorie. And happy birthday to the BPL.
171.
Yeah. Boy,
yeah,
it is a gorgeous place if people haven't been there, isn't it? That's a beautiful building with the beautiful courtyard, the tea room, the bar, the upstairs reading room.
They also have some pretty good books there. Remember, it's a library, right?
Well, it is, but they have other features besides that.
Were you a library kid when you were a kid? I don't even know this.
Oh, me too.
I know you were.
My library story is that my mother used to, when she did her Saturday errands, shopping and things like that, I would have her drop me off. This is from the time I was a very, very young kid at our local library. It was the Weaver Public Library in East Providence, Rhode Island. And I literally would be there while she ran all of her errands for the day. And I would be in the children's section, which was at the bottom level. And she would pick me up and I would spend the entire day reading like book after book after book.
Yeah, libraries.
That's
they are still the best. But anyway, we talked earlier with Chuck Todd about the Trump administration going after these law firms, these very powerful law firms in Washington that defended people like Hillary Clinton or Jack Smith, the prosecutor that went after Trump on a bunch of the federal cases. Well, now the two top Boston law firms, Goodwin Procter and Ropes and Gray, have gotten these letters from the Trump administration asking about their employment practices relative to DEI. They want the names, the sex, the race, the phone numbers, email addresses, law schools, GPA, as well as any bonuses, compensation, or promotions that these lawyers or other employees at these firms enjoy. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, what's going on is what I've been saying on this show for quite a while now, what Renee Graham says constantly, Boston Globe columnist Renee Graham says, and what Yvonne Abraham is talking about in her column in the Globe today, which is, this is very simply a complete re-entrenchment of white supremacy. We have not seen that in this country since the advent of the civil rights movement, which was preceded by years and years and years of Jim Crow. That's all this is. This is the federal government going into private law firms. They're already doing it with universities. We've seen it in dozens of other places. And basically suggesting to them that they're going to be under investigation by the EEOC, which traditionally looks at discrimination against marginalized communities and marginalized races. Clearly, as Yvonne Abraham points out in her column, 78, what is it? Is it 78 or is it
78,
more?
78%
of lawyers in this country are white people or white, if not white men.
Not enough.
Yeah, no, apparently not enough. This is simply an assertion of white supremacy. This whole, sort of cover that it has to do with this DEI and sort of demonizing the terms diversity. How can you demonize the term diversity, inclusion, and equity? They've managed to do it in much the same way as they managed to demonize the word liberal so much that Al Gore ran away from it when he ran for president, and that's probably part of the reason why he lost.
That's all it is. I want to pick up on what you said, which I think is so important. If I read one more news account that describes something like this, and there are a million examples, and the sentence ends with, as part of the Trump administration's anti-DEI initiative, says nothing to do with DEI, it has to do with racism. I mean, as you say, white supremacy, period. But the question for me, and this is what we also talked to Chuck about, Are the law firms going to fight back? I mean, first of all, there's no response to a story in the Globe about them this morning. Maybe they're considering what they do. I don't believe the Washington law firm, the name of which was center stage in this, responded either.
Yeah.
We know that university presidents, for the most part, lay low when they're threatened with hundreds of millions of dollars in research funding cuts. Are the law firms going to, they
may be out of business, some of these law firms, because the way they've structured it is if you hire one of these big D.C. law firms to represent you in some case, they're not going to hire these
So
law
the way
firms.
they stay in business is comply with these outrageous.
I don't know what they're going to do.
What do they do?
Well, I think it's a really, really great question. And I think this is where every lawyer, no matter where they work, but especially in these particular firms, needs to look at their professional responsibility and the code of ethics and what their job is as lawyers beyond the representation of any individual client. Just in the same way as prosecutors, according to the rules, are considered to be and are expected to be ministers of justice. Beyond winning a case for the state or for the Commonwealth, you're a minister of justice. You need to see that justice is done. Lawyers have particular ethical obligations and an obligation to the bar itself that they need to follow. And I will say this, while I would love to be able to answer unequivocally that they will fight back, what I will say is they better. Because if the lawyers bend to this, then, all is lost. If they don't assert themselves in this, and like you say, it has nothing to do with DEI. It has absolutely nothing to do with DEI. This is straight out racism, and it is exactly, and I know, Jim, you always hate it when people make this comparison, but people were made to bend to the will of the Nazis.
I don't hate it anymore.
You will not hire a Jewish person. You will not patronize this Jewish store. You won't say anything if you see us dragging somebody from their house in the middle of the night. You're not going to complain about that. That's exactly what this is. People shouldn't be kidding themselves that it's something different or that it will stop on their own. Democrats in particular should stop fooling themselves that somehow this is all going to even out. This needs to be met with a much greater response than what we're seeing.
Some people have also compared it to the Cultural Revolution in China under Mao Zedong, people being ostracized from their positions of work, too.
Well, they're not killing people. But short of that, I think the comparison is pretty... appropriate.
There were some people that were in the gulag, let's put it that way, for quite some time. But
also, can I just say, it bears noting, too, that the person who sent these letters is the acting chair of the EEOC, a woman by the name of Andrea Lucas. The EEOC isn't even fully staffed because Trump fired, I think, the two Democrats that were on the EEOC as soon as he got there. And as someone points out, I don't think it's anybody from one of the law firms, and it should be somebody from one of the law firms, but as someone else in the article points out, she doesn't have the authority to do this. They don't even have a fully staffed EEOC where they were able to discuss and vote on these kinds of things. This is the Trump administration just doing a full court press to get as much of this stuff into the ether. To Jim's point that he makes all the time, it's to have the chilling effect.
So at the same time that, as of the moment, the law firm leaders, the university leaders, with some notable exceptions, are hiding under their desks, Mayor Wu continues to take on this crap. And here's just 10 seconds of her State of the City last night. Frozen. We're always frozen.
Well,
here.
we can
She
tell
said,
you-
no one tells Boston how to take care of our own, not kings and not presidents who think they are kings. And by the way, this is...
Here's what else she said. I thought was we have to, the state of our city is strong. We have to be, because all over the country, people are feeling the weight of the federal administration attacking our sources of strength. The same people and purpose that made Boston great: public servants, veterans, immigrants, LGBTQ community institutions to conduct groundbreaking research and provide life-saving care. Those are kind of...
and let me just say, one, it's so good to hear somebody stand out. And you know what the other good thing about this is a continuation of, obviously, what she did in front of Congress. In light of the fact that politics is so contentious on every level, Kraft, to his credit, said the right thing after the Washington testimony, and I'm paraphrasing, that she did Boston proud, which I think she did, and obviously she's going to pay a price for this. We know that Homan, the so-called border czar, is after her. I'm sure others are. two, why as someone who's been involved in advocacy for much of your life there, Andrea Cabral, why have so few chosen this path and so many chosen silence as their path?
I don't know, maybe because so few are women.
But it was almost like we had rehearsed that, but we didn't.
No, we didn't. But I wouldn't say that that's the only reason. Although I do think that plays a role here. Women know what it's like to be bullied. Women know what it's like to be judged differently because they're women. But also, it has something to do with the mettle, and I mean METTLE.
Yeah.
The person who is doing the leading, and I'll contrast her to Chuck Schumer. I talk all the time about the need to meet the moment. There is a need for every single leader to meet the moment. And Michelle Wu is doing everything she can to meet this moment. You either stand up now or you're laying down for this and everything that's to come. You have to make choices. And those choices involve risks, sometimes very, very big ones. And I think she's meeting the moment.
We're talking to Andrea Cabral, someone who is not going to have a moment again, at least in his prior job, is now former state trooper Michael Proctor. I assume everybody remembers he was on the stand during the first Karen Reed trial, and he was he was directed to read some of his own texts about Karen Reed. And, sorry, the sound is not working. My apologies. Everybody's heard these things. He was dismissed by the colonel, the head of the state cops, after an investigation. Was this the right decision, Andrea?
Yes, I think it was appropriate for the colonel to follow the recommendation. This came as a recommendation from the Post Commission, which is the Peace Officers Training Council. And, this is a test, essentially, right? Because, the commission, actually, not training council, people have been waiting to see whether or not chiefs, people like the colonel, would follow the recommendations of this commission. It was put together to look into wrongdoing, to have a thorough investigation, to issue a report following that investigation, and to make recommendations. At the end of the day, it's still up to the individual chief of police or the state police colonel to follow it, and that's what Colonel Noble did in this case.
And by the way, he used, for those, since we couldn't play the sound, I know you know this, incredibly grotesque language, dismissive, denigrating language about her, and one segment ended with no nudes so far. And was he the lead investigator, the state cop on this, on this thing? And so there was accountability, and we talk a lot on the show about how little accountability there is for a lot of things that deserve accountability, and in this case, it was exacted. And obviously, his lawyers are saying he's going to appeal. It was unjust.
And we're talking to Sue O'Connell tomorrow, and she covered the first Karen Reed trial. I believe she's going to be.
I think he's doing this one too.
Yeah, she's going to be covering the second one as well. Has it started? I'm not sure what the date is.
Well, it's tentatively scheduled, I thought, for early April, but there's a request that it be postponed, which apparently the judge is not terribly excited about. But as of the moment, it's scheduled for the beginning of April.
One more thing. You were talking about how these lawyers better stand up. Do you think the judges are going to stand up? There's been all these stories lately about death threats to judges. There was Amy Coney Barrett, her family, plus her sister. The sister had a bomb scare. It was a hoax, thank goodness, but threatened against her. Her family's been targeted. She obviously is on the Supreme Court. We had an attack, a thwarted attack outside Kavanaugh's house a while back. But in this context of Trump's presidency, a lot of death threats toward these judges that oppose what the president has done. Politicians haven't stood up. Judges are facing a lot of pressure. What do you think they'll do?
Well, I'll say this. I think that there'll be a variety of responses. Clearly, the sort of Leonard Leo supported judges who were deemed underqualified or unqualified by the ABA but got confirmed anyway, they're never gonna run afoul of the Trump folks.
He was the head of the Federalist Society, which vetted and proposed many of the judges that were nominated by Trump. I'm sorry, Andrea, go ahead.
But as to the rest of them, I think that there will be some that will fail to meet the moment. But I'll say this: if you are a judge And every day, witnesses come before you, especially if you're a judge hearing criminal cases, witnesses who are under threat from the people against whom they are going to testify. You expect them to be in court. You may even be a judge who has held someone in contempt for not showing up, despite the fact that they were under threat. If you cannot continue to do your job in the way that you know that it should be done when you are facing a similar threat, no matter how difficult that is, then you ought not to be on the bench, because you can't ask others to do that which you are unwilling to do yourself.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned it. That was the so-called snitching, that we talked about in a lot of the criminal cases in Boston, where some kid in the neighborhood, a teenager, 16 or 17, knew who the shooter was, but they have no protection. No one's sending them off into the witness protection program in Las Vegas. They still got to live in the same block in the same house. And you're right, they were expected to show up and testify against that shooter, which takes an incredible you're risking your life, literally. And it always annoyed me. Why wasn't there witness protection stuff for these people? It used to be in the Suffolk County Prosecutor's Office. Why wasn't there?
Well, here's the thing. And the distinction that needs to be made even between them and the judges is whatever harm might befall regular civilian witnesses, judges at least have a certain amount of public presence. And the consequences for killing a judge or harming a judge or harming a judge's family members is much greater than some poor person who just lives in a neighborhood. They're actually, to some degree, more insulated. It doesn't mean that something terrible can't happen. We've certainly seen that over the years. But they have a much greater amount of protection and scrutiny about their safety than regular people.
Yeah.
And as to your question about who gets witness protection and who doesn't, that has always come down to money, which is unfortunate. It shouldn't, but it's unfortunate.
By the way, have you read this? Where a lot of people are getting pizzas. That's sort of I guess that's to say we know where you live. The Domino's pizza shows up at the house of the judge or the judge's family, and they don't know where it came from. I guess you can't eat a pizza if you don't know who sent it to you, can you?
Can we? I know this is not an original thought, but as I'm listening to the two of you talk,
I was just thinking about that. Everybody loves pizza, but it's a suspect pizza, so I guess you can't eat it. Go ahead, Jim.
The fact that the language of debate that is now permissible is to physically threaten another human being, and the norm is just unbelievable. And then we all have to say, and we're all nodding when Andrea said it a minute ago, if you can't stand up to that kind of heat, then you shouldn't do the job. It's hard. I mean, can you imagine? A few members of Congress have had the courage, not most of them, to say, one of the reasons I'm so nervous about criticizing Donald Trump is because I've gotten death threats. I've gotten messages saying they know where my kids go to school. I mean, it is. That's right. Fierce debate is wonderful in a democracy. This is so wildly out and I'm not sure. We're talking to Chuck Todd this morning.
We were just joking.
We're talking to Chuck Todd this morning about how heads of news organizations are cowering, and as a result, Chuck asserts that a lot of reporters are not asking the toughest questions.
And Jim and I admitted that we were hiding under our sturdy table here at the studio.
Luckily, we don't have that kind of responsibility. But it really, it causes you to question everything. I have great respect for the judicial system. We'll talk to Nancy Gertner about this tomorrow. How do we know that some of them are not pulling their shots out of fear for personal or family safety? We just don't.
You don't know. And the part that always baffles me is that every adult, and I've said this before on the show, knows how to stand up to a schoolyard bully. Trump literally was a schoolyard bully when he was in school. He is nothing but that now. He certainly has a lot more power behind him to do the kinds of things that he's doing. But at the end of the day, the kids in the schoolyard who want to be able to play during recess peacefully without seeing somebody get shoved to the ground or beat up, they outnumber the bullies. We have always outnumbered the bullies. But for some reason, the sort of devolving into cowardice, seems to kind of rule the day. And people should realize if you're getting death threats and the congressperson next to you or the judge next to you or whoever it is, the blogger, the person on Twitter is getting them as well, you have more strength when you stand together than if you back down individually. But we're not getting that. For some reason, we're not getting that.
Well, let me just say quickly, we spoke to Khalil Gibran Muhammad yesterday, now of Princeton, a little bit of Harvard, after the funding threats at Columbia, the Penn threats to Penn came yesterday. We said, why aren't the 8 Ivy League presidents meeting and holding a joint press conference saying they're not giving in? And his response was, they won't meet. And one of the reasons they won't meet is they don't want to be put in a position where they have to express solidarity with their neighbors. We're talking to Andrea Cabral.
So, Andrea, we always have such depressing stories, and I know it would be nice to divert from that. So this is kind of a crime that is not very depressing. It's sort of funny.
Oh, I know what this is. Go ahead.
This is the hooded gang that smashed its way into Blenheim Palace in Great Britain. It's where Winston Churchill was born. And what did they do?
They stole a solid 18 karat gold toilet, which actually is a functioning toilet.
Functioning, yeah.
I mean, it's sort of this combination of grotesque wealth and just kind of grotesqueness. Like the fact that people use this toilet.
Yeah, they said it was splendid to sit on. That was the report.
Yeah, one of the guys who's accused of actually stealing it.
That's right.
Said that it was, he went to this, wherever I guess it's in a museum, where it's done by, it's a piece of art done by this particular artist. People may know who this is because he's the guy who taped a banana
to the wall.
$6 million.
To a wall. Yeah, and somebody bought it for $6 million and then ate it, which is also kind of weird. But this is the same artist that did this toilet. And so people go there and they see it, and it's a functioning toilet. And one of the people who's accused of either partaking in the theft or being part of masterminding the theft said that he went there and he actually used it and that it was splendid. Of course, law enforcement's position is he was casing the joint, literally casing the joint before they stole it.
What are they doing with the toilet?
Can I tell you, by the way, I'm looking at it now. I hadn't looked at it before.
It's very impressive.
Unbelievable.
But my understanding is they're not keeping it as a toilet. Aren't they smashing it up into the pieces of gold? Selling parts of gold.
You'd have to. I mean, if you tried to fence a solid gold toilet, it would be so hot. Who would be able to buy it? Right, but you break it down. It's worth a lot.
Yeah, a piece of the rim would be about $500,000, and a bigger piece of the rim might be close to $1 million or something. What do you think? Solid gold?
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's really gorgeous.
Oh, I didn't look at it.
Well, here's the other thing.
Yeah.
The name of it. The artist's name is Maurizio Catalani. He's an Italian conceptual artist. He titled it America. That America is essentially a solid gold toilet.
Apropos.
It's beautiful.
Apropos. Well, I think the president has a lot of gilded things, but I'm not sure.
They said the Oval Office is becoming golder and golder.
But I think he's
Trump.
got but not the solid gold. I don't think. Does he?
I don't know. We'll check it out, Marjorie. Okay. We'll get back to
Andrea
in the morning.
I'm sure it's electroplate. Yeah, I'm sure it's.
Hey, Andrea Cabral, it's good to see you. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Andrea. Bye. Hang in there. We've been speaking with former Suffolk County Sheriff and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us every week. Okay, after a quick break, we're going to talk tariffs, we're going to talk interest rates, we're going to talk the Fed, our economy next with Axios business editor Dan Primack is here. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Brian McCreath, host of GBH Music's Boston Symphony Orchestra broadcasts. Join me this weekend for a concert celebration of the legendary John Coltrane. Trumpeter Terence Blanchard and the BSO reimagine the most popular and influential works of John Coltrane live from Symphony Hall. Coltrane Legacy for Orchestra. Saturday night at 8 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And MIT Sloan Executive Education, offering 2 to 3 day courses and executive certificates for professionals seeking cutting-edge business insights on innovation, cybersecurity, AI, and more. Info at executive.mit.edu. And Newbury Court, serving Concord, Massachusetts for 30 years as a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community dedicated to older adults. More at newburycourt.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're live at the library tomorrow. Fabulous music tomorrow. We're joined now in Studio 3 by Dan Primack. Dan is a business editor at Axios and author of the daily Axios Pro Rata newsletter. Dan, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Well, big news about the Boston Celtics. Do tell.
So it's been known for about a year, just after they won the championship. Wick Grousbeck said he and his dad were going to basically sell the team. And we've got a buyer. It's a guy named Bill Chisholm. He is a Massachusetts native, private equity guy. The announced price was $6.1 billion, but it's actually more, which is a record, by the way, not just for the NBA, but for any pro sports team anywhere in the world. The current record is the Washington Commanders, the NFL team. This is bigger than that. Even more, though, it's a two-part deal. He sells the majority stake for $6.1 billion this summer if the league approves it. The price then in 2 years for the remaining stake is going to be over $7 billion, about $7.3 billion, which again, given that 6 was the all-time record. And remember, the Celtics don't own the Garden, so they're doing this with no real estate underlying it.
And didn't they pay like a third of $1 billion, Delaware North or whatever?
The Jacobs family.
Who owned the hockey team. It was like a third of $300 million. What did they pay for this thing when they bought it?
Oh God, I should know this.
I think it was $300 million.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at the time, it was a lot of money.
Yikes! I asked you when we were in the break here. I said one of the people, knowing nothing about this, who I was hoping would end up buying in, is a guy I know casually because he used to donate a huge amount of money to cancer research when people like Charlie Baker and a lot of athletes would go get our heads shaved for a cause. Rob Hale from Granite Telecommunications. You say he's part of this deal?
He's part of this deal, and it's interesting because he is, right now, to our knowledge, the only current Celtics owner who's part of this. So Hale was a minority or is a minority owner in the Wick Grousbeck, Steve Pagliuca group that bought it, 20-something years ago. He is part of this group, and it's kind of interesting because Pagliuca, who is kind of always been viewed, and rightfully so, as kind of the secondary owner, he's not part of this group. He had a rival bid, and he lost, and he did put out a tweet. He seems displeased.
Do you know this? Oh, he did? What did he say?
Something along the lines of, we weren't picked. Clearly, I mean, look, I felt this from the beginning. If relations between Wick and Steve were very, very good, well, then Wick wouldn't have put this thing just out to a general auction. There's no rule that says you have to take the highest bidder, that you have to let everyone in. They could have worked out a deal, and Wick would have gotten his billions.
So who is this Chisholm? I'm sorry. Do you know who is this? Do you know Chisholm?
I don't know him personally. He's a private equity guy. He runs or co-founded and runs something called Symphony Technology Group, which I think is based in Philly, but he's from Massachusetts originally, born, raised here. I think went to Dartmouth for college.
So does this matter in terms of the tickets going to the Celtics? And obviously they're a championship team. Is this a good thing for them?
Honestly, it's a little too early to say. I mean, the one of the big things about Wick and the Steve group has been they've been willing to spend a lot of money. They've been willing to lose money. Remember, the Celtics lose money. And again, partially it's the Garden thing, right? They don't get the parking. They don't get all the concessions. They don't get all the stuff that, say, the Red Sox get or the Crafts get out of Gillette or that the Bruins get out of the Boston Garden. So the question's going to be, how much appetite for losses does Bill Chisholm have? And or does he decide the way to make this thing work is to eventually build his own stadium somewhere? But that's even additional money, and it's unclear where that would be. I don't know. Do the people in Dorchester want White Stadium to host the
expand
the
it a little bit more?
Put a roof on that thing?
So are you able to say what you said to us during the break about? I mean, you're a huge Celtics fan.
I am.
Can you say what the pitch you made to your bosses?
Oh, years ago. So the current owners. I mean, there's a lot of talk that the new one is a private equity guy. The old one were private equity guys. That's what Wick was and Pagliuca is. Years ago, after they bought it, I tried to get my boss to let me have to buy me season tickets so I could just source up during the games, go around and talk to all these guys, and I was denied. I thought it was a good pitch.
In the front row there. Yes, they are. Okay, so back to the non-play world.
Yeah.
The Fed meets yesterday, decides not to lower interest rates, even though I think Powell suggested that maybe a couple could be coming later in the year. What they say about, or did they say anything? tariffs, the uncertainty thing we talk about all the time. What did they say?
Yeah, the way Axios is reporting it today, I think this is smart, is that this is no longer the Fed's economy, it's Trump's economy, right? If you go back, for example, to the great financial crisis in 08, 09, it was really the Fed that was kind of driving the response to that. You got TARP, et cetera, but it was really the Fed that drove the response. And since then, they've really driven the big macro stuff on the economy, kind of the way it's supposed to be. What Powell really said yesterday, and you're right, rates unchanged, probably still 2 cuts at some point later this year. But what he really said was, we're in react mode. We're in wait and react mode. We are concerned about the tariffs. We don't really know how it's going to play out. We have a guess, but we don't know. So we don't want to make any decisions today before we can watch this start to work through the system. And the key date on this at the moment is April 2nd, because that's the date that Trump has said these reciprocal tariffs will go into effect.
I want to get to the tariffs in a second, but he did say, I thought Powell did say that it meant further delay of progress in their effort to lower inflation. He did acknowledge that, didn't he?
It is.
Powell?
I mean, inflation's down a little bit, but he also talked about that there was kind of some economic weakening. There was some weakened growth projections from them. It's interesting. The term everyone's talking about is transitory. In other words, inflation being transitory. This is something that Janet Yellen said years ago, and she, in the end, got absolutely hammered for because she was wrong. It's interesting that Powell has kind of returned to this without the exact phrase, but the same philosophy.
People that know nothing about the way the Fed works or economics works.
Like me and Marjorie.
Like me and Marjorie, yeah.
Like everyone but 5 people. They're all Fed governors.
Yeah,
well, you're one of the 5, actually.
This is way over my head. But, I hear a lot of people asking about this. Trump has taken over everything else. He's talked about taking over the Fed. I mean, is that a possibility, and what would that mean?
I mean, he hasn't yet taken over the Fed. He did tweet out, that he wants the Fed to lower rates. He did that a bunch, by the way, during his first term, too. He thought the Fed should do things, and he got upset. Remember, Powell, he renominated Powell. Could he? Yeah, but it would become a massive legal fight, right? Jay Powell's already said, I will not be fired. I have the right. But then again, Trump the other day did fire 2 Democratic FTC commissioners, which also is very questionable legally. So, and by the way, if he wins that and those commissioners are going to challenge that, the Supreme Court is just going to do nothing but deal with Trump stuff for like the next year. If Trump wins on that, in theory, could he fire Fed governors that still have terms to go? It would seem the same thing applies.
And what would that mean to the economy?
I would say Wall Street would freak out, right? Because the value, whether you agree with what the Fed is doing or disagree with what the Fed is doing, the Fed being apolitical has always been a kind of a feather in its cap. People trust the Fed. Again, they might disagree with it, but they don't believe it is making decisions at the behest of an elected official who's worried about domestic politics.
We're talking to Dan Primack from Axios. One of the ways that Marjorie and I pretend we understand economics is when all the experts say what business really doesn't like is uncertainty.
Uncertainty, that's right.
We say that too, and then it sounds like we know what we're talking about. But I don't know if you saw, it was a wonderful piece, I think in today's Times or yesterday, wonderful from my perspective, is when all of us, the unexpert or inexpert people, parrot the uncertainty thing. The thesis of this piece, I'm sorry I forgot who wrote it, is uncertainty may be the point on Trump, because he really isn't worried with this tariff stuff, and we'll talk about whether April 2nd is going to happen in a minute, about trade imbalances. He's worried about getting leverage from his tariff movements on other things he cares about. So uncertainty is an asset in those negotiations. And I have to say that made a lot of sense to me. Does it to you?
That makes sense to me. I would say, though, I think he does care about the trade imbalances. And by the way, most economists don't, right? When we say we have a trade imbalance with China or with Canada or whoever, what that means is we're buying more stuff than we're sending them. But that also means we're consuming a lot. And generally what that means is the U.S. economy is doing well enough that Americans have the money and interest in buying stuff. So traditionally, presidents and economists haven't worried about trade imbalances too much unless they're, massive and terribly skewed. So and Trump does view that as some sort of scorecard, right? He does believe trade surpluses or deficits matter.
He used to believe the stock market was a scorecard.
He used to, so I think he does still believe that. But yeah, no, look, I mean, chaos is the point, right? I mean, he's not, he understands what he's doing, that he's flooding the zone. He knows this.
And are there the tariffs? Everything was, not everything, some things put off till April 2nd. Are we going to live through the same April 1st, who knows kind of thing?
I think so. I mean, look, they've been steady on this date, but they've only been steady on it for, a couple weeks now. And I will say, after the stock market kind of tumult last week, which really was happening because Trump would tweet out or make a statement about a new tariff and then pull one off and then new one. He hasn't done that since the last day of the really big stock market declines, but he has been sticking on April 2nd. And really, no one does know how it's going to play. I mean, the Trump argument on this and the Scott Bessent argument on this, on tariffs is basically, look, there will be some short-term pain. There might even be short-term inflation. But what this is really going to do is drive more manufacturing to the U.S. because it's going to cost so much to buy stuff from overseas. It's going to force companies to make the stuff here. And in the end, we will all pay less. We'll all have more jobs, et cetera. The counter to that is, no, we're all going to pay so much more, and that short-term pain is going to be so bad that it's going to negate whatever we can maybe get in the future.
But, here again, as someone who does not know much about the economy, but I have read that the idea of bringing all this manufacturing back, and I know he's just, what's the company, NVIDIA, whatever it is, it's supposed to build a lot of chips here, and that's a good thing. But that's like a back in the 50s sort of thing, that we can bring manufacturing jobs back, and in 5 years it'll all be done by robots, and we really should be concentrating on other things that cannot be done by robots. So is that true?
I mean, there's two arguments. There's the jobs one, and by the way, U.S. manufacturing jobs had been rising for the last several years.
Yes.
Not by leaps and bounds, and not back to where we were in the 1950s as a percentage, but they had been going up. There's this other question. God, I just lost my train. Oh, the other question. There's a bit of a national security argument depending on what the thing is, right? If indeed we were to get into an actual sort of Cold War with China, like something legitimate. Wait a minute, if they're making so much of our stuff, including stuff we need, chips is a good example, right? Can we get new phones? Can we not get new phones? So there's a national security argument to this as well.
That was the Gina Raimondo chips bill.
Yeah, that was the chips bill, but it's beyond that, right? There's certain rare earths that we just don't have.
Well, we
in
also
the United
learned
States.
during COVID that was a problem.
Absolutely.
Did we not? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but we should be much more worried about educating people better so they can all become coders or something like that.
Or maybe not coders anymore because AI can do coding. Okay. But look, obviously education is important, and we're not great at that in this country.
No, so what we really wanted to talk about today was the future of Tesla. So why don't we start, since we don't play Fox News enough. Here's a clip from Fox News where they're criticizing people who are allegedly celebrating Tesla's stock value decline because, according to Fox News, there are 80,000 people employed by Tesla. Here it is.
Well, welcome to Stocks. Tim Walz has put the Tesla stock on his phone. He says he looks at it and takes glee when it drops. And in the clip, he says, oh, it's at 225. You're taking glee in a company dropping, likely because of what we're seeing. There are 80,000 people employed by Tesla, and you take glee in that? Don't take glee in domestic terrorism, because that is exactly what this is.
Domestic terrorism, of course, is the term used by Pam Bondi.
Are they cutting 80,000 from the VA?
No, that's a very
80,000 people.
Okay,
there.
so the stock is going. Is it 40%? It's going down
year to date, I think, or something like that. It's gone down by a lot. I mean, it's been an extraordinary
How much
drop.
trouble is Tesla in?
Tesla's in trouble, but not because of what Tim Walz is saying or because of what's happening there. I mean, Tesla's in trouble for two reasons. One, because its international business is getting eaten into, particularly by BYD, which is this big Chinese electric vehicle maker, which also just came out with a big tech breakthrough the other day.
I want to talk about that.
Which we'll talk about. So that's the problem. And the demand has been less. They've been promising this lower price car for a while that they haven't really rolled off yet. Tesla's in trouble. And third part is, unlike SpaceX, which is actually run by somebody else, SpaceX has a full-time CEO. Elon is the full-time CEO of Tesla, and he's not. I mean, he's explicitly not there, right? He's
How
in
come
DC.
there isn't a shareholder lawsuit? Forget the politics that say you're the head of this company I've invested in. It's losing value in not only because of your politics, arguably, but you're never here. I mean, why are they not doing that?
You could try to sue, but I mean, most Tesla shareholders are Tesla shareholders because they believe deeply in Elon Musk, and you would lose.
We only need one.
You only need one to sue, but there's not a law saying that a CEO has to be in his seat I guess if you're a federal worker, you need to be in your seat every day. But if you're the CEO of Tesla, you don't need to be.
Okay.
Tell people. I'm sorry.
You wrote this great piece about this BYD and the EV market. So tell us about it.
Yeah. So again, BYD, this big Chinese EV maker, they just came out with new charging technology. Or let me rephrase this. They claimed to come out with new recharging technology. When it comes to Chinese tech companies, you've got to be a little bit skeptical. But what it basically means is with these new cars and their EVs, you would be able to charge from 0 to 100 in 5 minutes, which is not quite what you can do at a gas station, but it's pretty damn close. And as somebody who owns an EV that charges very slowly, this could be a real game changer, right? It's one of the main obstacles to adoption. Is people, worried that there won't be anywhere to charge, which is still a problem. But if charging got down to 5 minutes, it's the sort of thing the private sector could get behind. Right now, if you own something that could become an EV charging station, the economics don't really work because someone has to sit there for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 2 hours. No gas station could survive like that, right? But at 5 minutes, you can make that work.
What kind of electric car do you have?
I've got a Ford Mustang Mach-E. It was the first version of it, and it is it's great, but man, it charges slow.
Yeah, somebody else on our staff.
Yeah,
has one of
well,
those
Jamie's
too.
actually had 3 of them right in a row.
Yeah.
Same exact car for a variety of reasons we will not share with people.
That does not sound good.
I want to stay with Tesla, though, for a couple of seconds, Dan Primack. He's promised a cheaper car, and it hasn't happened. He also, I believe, I don't know if he's talking about 5 minutes, but has talked about elevating the speed of the charge. And it is fast. I do own a Tesla, and it's 45 minutes as opposed to whatever it is, 13 hours or something, even on a media charger. And also, I hadn't thought of this the other day. Someone asked me what year my car was, and I was nervous. That was a prelude to I'm going to key it in about 2 seconds. And I didn't remember. I knew it was several years old. And it occurred to me for the first time, and then I read it when I went home in somebody's article. They never change. I mean, and one of the ways you get people to buy new cars, a model, is you change something in the car. They look exactly like they've always looked.
They do. I mean, it's tricky with some of these electric cars. And to be honest, a lot of cars, this is true of mine too, that have the software updates, right? Your car doesn't look any different, but it probably does different things now than it did when you first bought it.
That's true.
So that it's kind of a flip of a coin, right? On the one hand, you buy a car and it can do new things. Traditionally, if you want to, if it's 1985 and you want a car with cruise control, you probably have to buy a new car. You don't have to do that with Teslas, or to be honest, with mine either.
So is this decline in Tesla's stock value and a whole bunch of factors here? Is this potentially a fatal kind of thing for this company?
It's not fatal. I mean, Tesla still has a massive valuation, right? Like, I mean, the company has always been overvalued by any sort of basic business metrics, right? In part because people always believe in the future. Maybe they're going to build these robots. They're going to be the first fully legitimately self-driving car company, et cetera. So the valuation's always been extremely high. Is this fatal? No. But is it problematic? Yes. Particularly the politics of it. I mean, this has been talked about a lot, but traditionally Teslas were bought by people like you, Jim, with political persuasions like you, with environmental concerns like you. That's all been flipped on its head. So the question of who is the target Tesla consumer now, I think is a big, giant question.
Well, that's the next thing I wanted to ask. I'm sorry. This last thing on Tesla, at least from me, is obviously Trump did the salesperson thing with he bought the red, whatever, I don't know what model it was, for $80,000 or some such thing, or allegedly bought it. We don't know if he really bought it. So to make it more appealing to people who follow his lead on everything, including when he said, don't buy an EV, but now you should buy a Tesla. Frankly, I'm sure this is going to anger some of our listeners, so apologies in advance. I'm not sure I know somebody well who would buy a Tesla, even though it's one of the finest machines I've ever had an associated with in my life. There's no evidence that the uptick on the Trump-loving side of the economy is making up for the loss from the traditional Tesla buyer.
Not yet. I mean, not yet. We'll see what Q1 numbers show, right? That'll give us a little bit of a sense. But again, when you're talking about buying a car, it's a lot different than buying a hat, right? The economic outlay there's no balance to this. So, or even a flag, and this is more like buying a boat. So maybe not quite, but close. So I think time will tell. And again, for Tesla, the international stuff is as important, if not more important, than the domestic, right? The international market is bigger than the domestic market.
But it's not doing as well in China.
It is not. It's not doing as well in Europe either.
Yeah. We're talking with Dan Primack, who's business editor at Axios. Dan, Trump has laid off a lot of these people through Doge, in the government, 10,000 here, 10,000 there. They begin to add up after a while. Some of them may get rehired. But what does this mean for our economy? Is it too small a number to really matter? Or it seems to me there's going to be a lot of unemployed people if he keeps this up.
I think it's probably going to be a little bit more regional, right? So, if we were having this conversation, in Virginia or Maryland or the D.C. metro region, it matters a lot, right? That's a lot of people. And you're already hearing, Axios is based in D.C., and so I have colleagues who are talking about how easy it is right now to get a house, or particularly people who are trying to rent, and how extraordinarily easy it is for them to find a place and be able to talk down prices that just, 6 months ago
Because people have left already?
People have left. Well, if you don't have work, if you're somebody who is kind of a career bureaucrat in D.C. and you've been laid off or think you're about to get laid off, you might leave, right? Because what's the next? It's not like change departments. That department's not hiring either. So yeah, they're getting out of town. So I think it's going to be a little bit more regional. Will it have an impact? Yeah. When you're talking about, tens, hundreds of thousands of people losing their job, yeah, it matters. The question, will they be? We still have a pretty low unemployment rate. So can they be absorbed into other parts of the economy? You would hope so, but there's going to be dislocations, no doubt.
Well, okay, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and we also worry, Maura Healey talks about this all the time. We do eds and meds, as she called it. Education and medical centers are big here. And she was sounding pretty dire about what could happen to the economy of Massachusetts if these cuts remain in place.
Yeah, look, the education piece is enormous, right? I mean, I don't think people probably until about a month ago outside of academia, appreciated just how much the big research universities, including the ones here in Boston, rely particularly on NIH funding. It's an extraordinary amount of money, which is why you're seeing hiring freezes at places like Harvard, which is unheard of.
Yeah, and also recruiting from other countries. I mean, a lot of people might want to go to Paris.
Well, that's it. That was the last thing I wanted to bring up is what Marjorie just touched upon. We know these research grants are getting cut dramatically. We know what happened at Columbia, just staying in the university world. Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, $175 million yesterday because of the trans swimmer a couple of years ago. Is there a market for people to do this kind of research in this country, or are they going to be lured away from this country by...
I don't know if they'll be lured away from this country. I mean, some of them will get, brought into biotech companies. The real problem isn't really necessarily so much those individuals, right? Because if you're somebody who's doing research, say, at Harvard or at MGH, you can probably join a biotech company and they would love to have you. You have the same basic skill set. The real problem is this basic R&D. The work that gets done with these grants, whether it be at Harvard or hell, even Boston College, a place like that, it's this often...
Even Boston College?
It's not considered the same from a medical perspective.
Okay, good.
It's kind of this fundamental bio research, which eventually maybe sometimes gets commercialized and maybe doesn't. But if you look at some of the big biotech companies in Boston, Moderna is a good example, a lot of these come from academic research, and there's no replacement for that work because it's so early stage and takes so long. It's basically impossible to make an investment in it. So really, the real concern is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, not so much on the labor piece, Marjorie, as you said. Really, it's on the medicine piece and the treatments we will or possibly won't have discovered. Was
mRNA a academic thing?
I believe partially, yeah. And the firm that created a firm called Flagship, they often just pull stuff out of either MGH or Harvard and kind of that whole area.
Well, Dan, all I can say is we're glad somebody understands the economy.
Yeah, but you do wonder why Donald Trump or the people in the federal government think it was a good idea to not have research on things like cancer and Alzheimer's, state-of-the-art, the best you could get. It does seem odd. There's no DEI there that he can trounce all over, is there?
I mean, what's too bad is that there wasn't before the announcements got made, that there was a conversation. There is an argument to be made that some of these universities have too much overhead, right? Because the issue wasn't cutting the grant. I mean, some of it's cutting grants for DEI reasons, and which you can debate. But part of it was these so-called matching grants. It's $1 million for Harvard to study X, but then the university also gets a certain percentage on top of that. And historically, all of those individual percentages have been negotiated directly between the individual school and the federal government. It's always been a little weird that one school is at 50% and one school is at 30% and one school is at 20%. It's too bad there wasn't a conversation between the White House and at least, the 20 largest universities first to try to work something out before this blanket cut, which is said, it will hurt future research.
Dan Primack, it's great to see you as always.
Thank you very much
Thanks
for your terrific reporting. Thank you for coming in.
Great.
We've been speaking with Dan Primack, business editor at Axios and author of the daily Axios Pro. Is it Rata?
Rata.
Ask him.
Rata. Thank you.
How do people subscribe to that, by the way?
Newsletter.
Getprorata.axios.com.
Pro Rata. That's P-R-O.
Or Axios /newsletters. That's the easiest way to do it.
Axios.com
/newsletters.
Okay, I love Axios. It's great. After a quick break, two stories we couldn't cover in the other 2 hours and 55 minutes we had to talk on this show. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
A Veterans Affairs home loan program has so far saved thousands of vets from foreclosure. They needed saving because of the VA's own mistake. But now an effort in Congress could kill the program.
Getting rid of something that would keep me and my family in a home is just intentionally cruel.
I'm Elsa Chang. That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And MIT Federal Credit Union, with memberships open to the general public, offering share certificates and certificates for retirement to help members reach their savings goals. Membership info at mitfcu.org, federally insured by NCUA. And the Massachusetts Health Connector for Business. New premium value plans can help small business owners find and offer accessible employee health benefits. Learn more at mahealthconnector.org/business.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, live at the library tomorrow. Marjorie wanted me to say no tickets or RSVP. It's time for two more things, and here's Marjorie's one more thing.
Well, I just want to mention, we've had Lydia Downey on with us many times. She has run the Pine Street Inn and all their things around it, their apartments, the housing where you get a lot of help for whatever you're dealing with. Obviously Pine Street is a huge shelter. They have just named this brand new huge apartment building. It's called the Lindia, and it's in her honor. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's one of these places where formerly homeless residents in 140 units, that's pretty good size. They're going to pay 1/3 of their income as rent. There'll also be remaining units of the building. There'll be a lot of services there for people that are coming out. Yeah, supported housing. It's just a great thing. And it's kind of neat that it was put together. Lot of players, big-time players in Boston: Mass Mutual, Bank of America, Liberty Mutual, Mass General, Suffolk Construction, TD Bank, Eastern Bank, Eversource. I mean, these big companies, Related Beal, they got together and helped fund this operation, which is pretty neat. So congratulations to Lindia, a well-deserved honor for her.
You're supposed to say one more thing.
What?
I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, I don't know.
When's she going to be here?
Oh, she's going to be here April 11th.
She is with one of those people. I think
she's going to be here April 11th. That's right. I forgot that.
You're welcome.
Okay, you go ahead now, Jim.
So, weatherman Pete Bouchard is back in the news. Does that ring a bell with anybody? It will in a second. Pete is a meteorologist at NBC 10, home of some of the people we're crazy about: LaToya Edwards, J.C. Monahan, and of course Sue O'Connell. Well, he's in the news not because of some amazing forecast, but because he tweeted that in the landing of the space capsule, the one we were describing yesterday, perfect sky with strips of clouds, beautiful sea, incredible parachutes, dolphins swimming around. He said there were, quotes, strong hints of AI enhancement. That's what he tweeted. And when it became clear there was no evidence for his Debbie Downerism, Bouchard deleted his post. Well, beginning to remember him now, I know Marjorie does.
I do.
Here's why. Pete rose to international fame, not just local fame, international fame in 2010 when he said this about snowfall in a particular Massachusetts town.
Picking up some snow, are we? Yes, we are. In Princeton, we picked up 9 inches of snow. Bill Ricca had 7, the biggest amount that I could find, almost as big as me.
Okay, well, that was
about
it.
9 inches.
Excuse me, I talked over him. My apologies. 9 inches. Here's what I'd say to that, quoting Pete Bouchard himself, strong hints of AI enhancement. That's what I would say. Good luck, Pete.
Okay.
Good to talk to you.
I have to correct myself.
What'd you get wrong?
Yet again. Yeah, it's the 140 apartments is for people that will need support from Pine Street. But the whole thing is 202 units, and it's in Jamaica Plain, and the grand opening just happened. So
Can I say something then, since you added?
Yeah.
Strong hints of AI enhancement. Oh, I said that already.
Okay.
Strong hints of AI
that was one of the great weather reports of all time.
It was one of the great.
Agree. Okay.
Told you everything you needed to know. Probably a little more
than you actually needed to know, but inquiring
NBC 10
people
Boston.
were asking about it.
Sue will be on tomorrow. We'll talk to Sue about this tomorrow.
That's right, our media maven. But coming up after the 1 o'clock news, Donna Lieberman from the New York Civil Liberties Union. She's going to talk about her work defending, you have all heard of him, Mahmoud Khalil. He's a Columbia graduate who has been taken out of his home, and he's now in detention in Louisiana.
H is committed to lifelong learning, and the Beacon Circle shares that commitment with gifts of $2,400 or more. It's one big way to help keep our community informed and connected. Learn more at gbh.org/Beacon Circle.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And The Huntington, presenting The Triumph of Love, Marivoux's beloved classic where mistaken identities, hilarious complications, and deeply felt desires collide. On stage March 7th through April 6th. huntingtontheater.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. One of the largest unions representing employees of the U.S. Postal Service is holding rallies across the U.S. today. NPR's Hansi Lo-Wang reports workers are protesting efforts by the Trump administration to reshape the Postal Service.
Members of the American Postal Workers Union are demonstrating in more than 100 locations against President Trump's comments last month. They confirmed his administration is considering having the Commerce Department take control of what Congress set up to be an independent postal service. Legal experts say that will likely spark a lawsuit. Trump has also said privatizing the country's mail service is, quote, not the worst idea he's ever heard. APWU President Mark Dimmonstein says he's worried that could lead to higher shipping rates and the closing of local post offices.
We say over and over, the U.S. mail is not for sale. Hands off for public postal service.
The head of USPS recently signed an agreement to work with Elon Musk's Doge team to find efficiencies. Hansi Lo-Wang, NPR News, Washington.
The Postal Service is a financial supporter of NPR. The Pentagon has restored some of the pages on its websites that highlighted the contributions of African-American veterans such as Jackie Robinson, the Tuskegee Airman and Vietnam-era Medal of Honor recipient, Major General Charles Calvin Rogers, as well as the Navajo code talkers from World War II and the Japanese-American 442nd Combat Regiment. Two defense officials not authorized to speak publicly told NPR that these and others were taken down through a review of thousands of stories, photos, and videos meant to remove DEI material in line with the Trump administration's policy guidance. Dozens of Palestinians were killed overnight in Gaza in Israeli airstrikes. Israel has broken the ceasefire with Hamas in the enclave and resumed military action. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf reports Israel has also partially limited movements for Gaza residents who want to travel from the northern part of the enclave to the southern part.
Israel has sent troops back to the Netzarim corridor, a large strip of land that divides Gaza's north and south. Early in the war, Israel had blocked that corridor, closing passage for Palestinians. But recently, passage reopened and troops left as part of the ceasefire. Now, once again, Israel has partially limited movement. Israeli airstrikes are also ongoing, killing at least 70 Palestinians yesterday and dozens more overnight, according to health officials there. Israel says this new offensive is meant to pressure Hamas into agreeing to a new ceasefire deal, different from the one both parties agreed to in January. The militant group says it is committed to the previous deal and that talks with mediators are ongoing. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
U.S. stocks are mixed this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average now up 58 points at 42,026. The Nasdaq is down 41 points, and the S&P off 6. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Boston Celtics have been sold. A group led by Massachusetts native William Chisholm is buying the franchise for $6.1 billion. That's the most a team has sold for in the history of North American sports. Smith College sports economist Andrew Zimbalist says he's not surprised the C's fetched such a high price.
They're in a great sports town and a great NBA town. So it makes sense to me that they would be setting a record, particularly since they're the last team sold. When the next team is sold, maybe it won't be a record anymore.
The Celtics were put on sale last year, soon after winning their record 18th NBA championship. Chisholm, who grew up in Georgetown, Massachusetts, says he knows he has a responsibility to uphold the team's owner, and he says he's ready for the challenge. It'll soon be more expensive to take an Uber or Lyft to Logan Airport. In a vote this morning, the Massport Board raised the fee for rideshare trips to and from the airport by more than $2 to a total of $5.50. That is, of course, on top of the cost of the ride itself. The higher fee will take effect this July. Massport Board member John Nucci says the move is necessary to raise money for infrastructure upgrades meant to ease congestion in the communities around Logan.
Nobody on this board wants to raise fees, but to do nothing right now, it could be a disaster waiting to happen. I know firsthand, living in East Boston, what it's like.
The vote is a win for Uber and Lyft. The companies have been worried about a potentially higher fee hike. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with its Name Your Price tool, a way to see coverage options based on a driver's budget. Learn more at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow with live music from the Cuban-born pianist Zili Zamora. He's supposed to be fantastic, plus retired.
She, too.
She's supposed to be fantastic.
She is. I was listening to her last night.
Okay.
She's incredible.
She's supposed to be fantastic.
She
Thank you,
is.
Jim.
Thank you.
Plus retired
Her brother
federal
is
judge.
great, too,
Her
by the
brother's
way,
great.
from what I heard.
I hear,
He is really
He plays a mean clarinet, I understand, and maybe he'll come to accompany her
Okay, sorry
on
about
the
that.
piano.
Go
Okay. Retired federal judge Nancy Gertner is going to be with us as well, and our media maven, Sue O'Connell, who's still our media maven. Hello again, Jim. Oh, by the way, we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
We are indeed.
Yes, we
so,
are.
Columbia graduate and permanent legal resident, green card holder, Mahmoud Khalil, we've talked about a lot on the show last week, remains in ICE detention today in Louisiana as the Trump administration attempts to deport him, not because he's been convicted of a crime. He hasn't even been charged with a crime, but apparently because of his vocal pro-Palestinian advocacy, which in the Trump administration equates with virulent anti-Semitism. Joining us now via Zoom is Donna Lieberman. Donna is the executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, which is part of his legal defense team. She's also an old friend of mine from years and years and years ago when we were young lawyers in New York City. Donna, it's great to see you. Welcome.
Nice to see you, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us a little bit more about this young man. I didn't learn until today that he was born in a refugee camp in Syria. He's Palestinian. So tell us a little bit more about him and what's happening.
Well, he was, he's here on a green card. He's married to an American citizen. He just graduated he just finished his degree at Columbia. And his wife is 8 months pregnant, actually by now 8.5 months pregnant. He's about to become a dad, and he was spirited away by the Department of Homeland Security, returning from a dinner with his wife. And he's been arrested. He's being detained. And his green card has been revoked by the government simply, as Jim said, because of his political views. He's not accused of one piece of criminal wrongdoing. It's all because of his political views that the government says are a danger to foreign policy.
You know, before we get to that whole issue, his political views, the First Amendment and such, and also what the administration is saying, particularly through the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is he in Louisiana? Did the feds put him in Louisiana in the hopes that you and your colleagues would end up going to a Louisiana court, which would probably be more conservative than the courts where it's going to be heard in Jersey? Was that what was behind that, or is there something else?
Well, that's our view of what was behind it. They wanted to get him into much friendlier territory for the government. And
what would they say? What would they say was the reason that he's in Louisiana?
He's in Louisiana now, and that's where his case should be heard.
No, I meant why would they say they took him to Louisiana, which obviously makes him, his lawyers much less accessible. Obviously, his 8.5 months pregnant wife less accessible. What defense would they give of plopping him there?
Oh, they move people around all the time. It's where they hold people. I mean, there's a place in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where people are detained. They were claiming that there's not enough room. There are bed bugs there, whatever cockamamie, justifications for moving him. Originally, we were told he was going to. Or his lawyer was told that he was going to Federal Plaza in New York, 26 Federal Plaza. You know where that is. And then they, while he was still listed as being at Federal Plaza, they spirited him off to New Jersey, and then to Louisiana. So where this case happens is important. He needs to be, he needs to have his case heard where all the actions that are being contested took place. And also where his legal team is and where his family is. And of course, we're asking for him to be released pending the resolution of the claims.
I'm not a lawyer. You're both lawyers. I just used to think that when you were arrested, you had a chance to call your lawyer or call somebody. What's the difference here? Because it's ICE or because he's not an American citizen? Or why couldn't he, or could he call a lawyer?
Well, he was actually on the phone with his lawyer when DHS grabbed him. And they were trying to ask questions about, do you have a warrant and stuff like that. And the ICE people would not respond at all. They just insisted on taking him, and they threatened to take his wife. There's a video online. You can find it on our Instagram, NYCLU or ACLU, that shows what happened. And it's everybody should watch it because it is gut-wrenching.
Not only should they watch that, he wrote a letter that was published in its entirety and in these times describing first person what happened to him and what's happening to him, which is really pretty powerful. We're talking to Donald Lieberman, head of the Civil Liberties Union in New York. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is when you're a permanent legal resident, the United States could deport you in one of two circumstances. One, if you're convicted of a crime, and as I said, he hasn't even been charged with a crime, so that's not there. What Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is claiming is under, I don't know, the Immigration and Nationality Act or some such thing from the 50s, that if, and I hope I get the language right, that if your behavior runs afoul or adversarially to what Rubio defines as U.S. foreign policy interests, he contends that not only can you be deported, but you can be deported without due process. Is that what they're arguing here, Donald Lieberman?
Yep, they are. And there's actually no basis for that. They're really picking and choosing from the statute and ignoring the most important piece, which is the United States Constitution. This is a statute. And even if it said what Marco Rubio claims, the Constitution forbids it because the Constitution protects free speech for everybody. The Constitution also affords us due process before our speech rights can be taken away and before we can be deported. But this is a statute that has never been applied to anybody but high-level officials of foreign governments. So they're trying to claim here that a recent graduate of Columbia is going to have an adverse effect on U.S. foreign policy. Give me a break. They're pulling at everything they can because they don't have a decent argument. This is speech, speech, speech. They hate what he has to say. They don't like it. He is sharply critical of Israel. But this is, I thought, or it was, a free country. And the First Amendment doesn't just protect citizens, it protects everybody who's here.
Well, one of the questions I've had, too, during this whole thing, I mean, we've had just today, I think it was 500 people were killed in
Palestinians
Palestine today. Many of them children. There were many.
200 kids.
Yes, 200 kids. How are you supposed to protest on a college campus if you are upset about this, whether you're a Palestinian or a Jewish kid who's upset about this or anybody who's upset about this? What's the correct way to protest?
In the era of Trump, you mean?
Yes.
Well, I think the jury is out on that, but the jury is not out on what the Constitution provides, and the Constitution provides that college students and non-college students and people here on green cards have a right to free speech. College faculty have a right to free speech, but what the Trump administration is doing with the Khalil case, with the clawback of canceling federal grants, is trying to bully universities into becoming a mouthpiece for the administration, being a mouthpiece for Trump's policies. They're trying to bully students into submission, and they're trying to bully the universities into bullying the kids into submission. And this is not at all an overstatement. But the bottom line is students have the right to protest. When they engage in civil disobedience, it needs to be treated as civil disobedience, not as some horrific terrorism. And the universities cannot be allowed to silence students because they disagree or because the president of the United States disagrees with the political viewpoint that they are stating.
And by the way, there's no evidence. I know that in these Times piece, your client was very critical of the administration at Columbia, and we mentioned the other day that not coincidentally, Columbia completed their 1-year examination of the behavior of some students, and right around the time of this, they kicked some more students out. The assumption being, at least in my mind, to assuage, they hoped, the concerns of the Trump administration with how they're doing their business. I want to stay on Khalil just for a second. In your statement, one of your first statements after you began representing him, you talked about the chilling effect of this. And what I've been saying here, Donald Lieberman, is Trump has won whether your client gets justice or not. Because it seems to me that if you're another Mahmoud Khalil, who lives in this country, wants to stay in this country, even with a green card and permanent residency, and as a partner that's 8.5 months pregnant, you have to fear that even if you've done nothing wrong, you're just exercising your First Amendment rights, and as I say, you're a permanent legal resident, if he can be snatched, even if you get him completely exonerated, he had to live through this nightmare for weeks at least, it's going to happen to me. So he has sort of won in a way. Has he not, Trump?
The irreparable harm, the chilling effect on protest rights is unthinkable. It's huge. And what's important, I think, is that folks who are not particularly vulnerable need to be out there protesting. They need to be out there supporting Mahmoud Khalil, and they need to be out there supporting their fellow students, faculty members, and stating whatever their position is on the conflict, whether it agrees with the official United States policy or not.
But that's not. It doesn't seem to be happening, though. I mean, we've talked about Harvard University, which is has very deep pockets. People peacefully protesting for Palestine just a few weeks ago, and it was a big deal. It was not greeted. They were peaceful, and there were penalties paid, including suspension. So it's not happening anymore, really, at all, is it? I don't know. It doesn't seem to be.
Well, it is happening, and I think that it will happen more and more as people begin to appreciate the scope and the gravity of what is going on. We at the ACLU are fighting back, with everything that we have. The day that Mahmoud Khalil's case was on in federal court, there were thousands and thousands of people in Foley Square to protest, to make their voices heard. So it's absolutely correct. The Trump administration is throwing so much at us and destroying so much, with their slash and burn tactics. That I think, some people are deer in the headlights, but people are angry, people are upset, people are realizing that even Trump supporters, that this is not what they bargained for. And I think that people are waking up, and they will be in the streets very soon.
Before we move on to something else, Donald Lieberman, what's your expectation as to when and if Khalil will get his freedom back and be back in New York City with his family? I don't want to say an expectation, but we're fighting with everything we've got. We're asking that he be released, and we're asking that his green card, and that he be released to be with his family now. And there's a separate proceeding about the green card, and that's going to happen as well. But this is such a travesty of justice, such a travesty of American values, I think it's really important that we appreciate how dangerous the Trump administration's attack on our university system is. They are trying to dictate how universities
run their affairs. They're trying to dictate curriculum. They're trying to dictate admission standards. They're trying to dictate faculty. This is a serious attack on our entire system of higher education. Those guys who don't like big government, man, they sure do want to run our lives, and they sure do want to squeeze out, independent academic pursuit.
Can we stay on that for a second? I know our listeners are going to say we're the ultimate broken record, Marjorie and I, on this issue, so our apologies in advance. We were speaking to a professor, formerly at Harvard, now at Princeton, Khalil Gibran Muhammad, either yesterday or the day before, who has been talking to some people at Columbia. And the discussion we were having with him, which we've had with a dozen other people, but he was most recent, is, why don't the 8 Ivy League presidents, just to pick one example, say, and the $175 million denied Penn hadn't happened yet. That happened yesterday. The $400 million in research money being canceled at Columbia had happened. Why aren't they all getting together and standing up and saying, we're not going to tolerate this at any of our institutions? In fact, they seem to be hiding under their desks. Why do you think the predominant view of how to, quote, I was going to say fight Trump, deal with Trump, is on bended knee? What we've seen at Columbia and what we believe is happening at Columbia is all about the donors, But Columbia, like Harvard, they have billions in endowment. If anybody can afford to stand up to Trump and to stand up for what their mission is, which is academic freedom, which is like teaching and learning, which requires free debate, it's the big institutions. And, I know as I'm from the Boston area, as a Harvard alum, there are petitions circulating among alumni to demand that Harvard stand up for academic freedom and stop being a tool in the censorship machine of the Trump administration. One last thing before we leave Columbia. When Donna mentioned a minute ago this academic freedom thing we talked about the other day, one of the demands the Trump administration is making is that 3 departments at Columbia be put in receivership for at least 5 years, which is just unheard of in the history of this country. We're talking to Donald Lieberman, the executive director of the Civil Liberties Union of New York.
Are you ready to move on to something else?
I am ready to move on.
I want to talk to you about something that we've been talking about with Carol Rose, who runs the Massachusetts ACLU.
Good buddy of hers.
Yeah.
You guys are so lucky.
Yeah, no, she's great. We have her on all the time. And she's talked a lot about getting the ERA as law here in Massachusetts. We haven't gotten very far on that. But what have you done in New York? You've had much more success. So tell people.
Yeah, in New York, the bright spot in the election in November was that New York overwhelmingly voted to pass a state constitutional amendment known as Prop 1, which is a state equal rights amendment that provides comprehensive protection for equality. It protects abortion. It protects all the gender categories. It protects against sex discrimination. It protects trans people, LGBTQ, the whole range of LGBTQ folks. It protects against discrimination based on national origin, ethnicity, disability, and age. And, for years and years and years, New York had no jurisprudence of equality because we relied on the U.S. Constitution. It had robust protections. Well, now that it no longer does, New York has jumped in and tried to inoculate New Yorkers to provide bulletproof protection for equality. And it's great news, and it's exciting for us. It creates a lot of work because we need to create a whole set of jurisprudence in New York, but it's fabulous.
So as you know, we've had 2 Boston law firms that have been, the 2 big ones have been, they're being investigated by the federal government, asking them to release information about names, DEI programs, phone numbers, whom they hire, all this kind of stuff. Will that protect New York or not? I mean, can they come after these same law firms or any other organization in New York to ask them the details of whom they hire and what the status of their DEI programs are?
Well, no loss, regardless of the Constitution, no law firm should reveal that. No law firm whatsoever should ever reveal that information to a Trump, investigation. It makes no sense. They have no right to that information. What our constitutional provision will do is protect us. We have a robust set of statutes already, discrimination laws already. But what this does is protect us from like the whims of political change. You get one bad election, you lose all three branches, and boom, you can revert what Trump is doing now at the federal level. You can reverse years and years and years of important progress in protecting equality. The elimination of DEI programs, a government mandate to eliminate DEI programs at the state level would violate both statutes and Constitution here in New York. And Carol can tell you about Massachusetts.
No, I mean, Carol always talks about us is trying to do what you're doing here, is to inoculate people from our state as best as possible. Right. And obviously, well, it's a wonderful strategy if you're lucky enough to live in New York or in Massachusetts. If you live in a red state, you're sort of screwed. And but I guess we have to protect our own. Last question. Are you, I don't know how, Margie, I mentioned you when I reunited with you yesterday on the phone. The last thing I'd read about you was how Donna Lieberman spends her Sundays. A story in the New York Times.
Sounds wonderful.
I was like, oh my
Bacon
God.
and eggs.
But how stressful is this? I mean, I feel as people who do what we do, where we don't have much responsibility except to be honest, and to get as much information out as we can, that we almost can't catch up every day with the horrors that are befalling. What's it like doing what you do in New York? How hard is that, and how stressful is it?
Well, this is really hard work, and it's really important work. But you know, the New York Civil Liberties Union, like the Massachusetts ACLU, you know, has an amazing staff of passionate, talented lawyers, organizers, comms folks. And so we do it, and we do it well every day. We have a lane. We can't do everything. And people are asking us to do so much. You know, the intake lines are just really hot. But we have goals. We try to do what we can do and be clear about what we can't do. It's hard. It's hard to turn anybody away when the threat is so enormous. But, you know, I'm a mom. I raised a couple of kids. I have a few grandchildren. If you read that in the paper,
yes, you did.
Saw them in the
With
Times.
The breakfast,
did.
Right. And, you know, and I do my pottery. So there's an escape, but you know, you have to, I think for all of us, we have to, you know, make space to sort of just chill for a bit so that we can recharge. And I'll tell you, the folks at the ACLU are working so hard and so well and so strategically. We have to be strategic, and we're going to give this, you know, every bit of fight and wisdom that we have, and we're going to stand up. We're not going away.
Now, you said you had one last question. I have one last question. Donna Lieberman, you knew Junior Jimmy there back when he was a young, aspiring attorney in New York City.
And what do you want to know?
Did you see? Well,
what do you want to know?
You got any good stories? I'd love to hear those.
Okay, we're out of time.
Did
nice
you see where
Donna
he was going to go
Lieberman.
on to become the king of all media, at least in his own mind? In Boston, you know, radio, TV, big political star. Could you see it then in Junior Jimmy?
Yes, she could. Yes, she could. Is that what you're going to say?
Absolutely, Jim. You were a star then. No, you're a star now.
Donna, it is great to see you
on the radio.
We're really, really glad you're doing what you're doing, and it's great to reconnect. Take care. Good luck with Khalil, too.
Very much. And your breakfast with the grandkids sound absolutely wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
See you soon, Don. Be well.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.
We've been speaking with New York Civil Liberties Union Executive Director, Donna Lieberman, who knew Jim back in the glory days there.
Glory days.
In the Big Apple. After a quick break, we're ending on a lighter note. It is Am I the A-Hole Day? Is a friend in the wrong when she gets her insatiable guest to bring her own groceries when she visits, since she eats so much of the groceries the poor host has in the house? You can weigh in next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Judy Ewell, in for Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, we'll hear what President Trump's effort to abolish the Department of Education could mean locally. Also, the Boston Celtics have been sold for a record $6.1 billion. Plus, a debacle at the Department of Veterans Affairs nearly forced thousands of vets into foreclosure. Now, Congress could kill the program that saved them. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, live at the library tomorrow. So earlier in the show, we talked with all of you about the World Happiness Report, and if spending a little more time with friends and loved ones might make our lives a little better. Obviously, the wonks at the World Happiness Report don't have a friend who eats $60 worth of groceries every time they come over to your house. Welcome to another round of Am I the A-Hole, where we scrape the bottom of the barrel on Reddit for a so-called real-life scenario and have you weigh in. So here's the context for today's dilemma. A woman enjoys having friends over from time to time and always makes a point to be a good host by providing food, snacks, drinks, etc. But she has one friend who needs a little extra attention, who comes over usually when she's not feeling a little bit low, coming over every week and eating, and this is not a typo, $40 to $60 worth of groceries every trip, helping herself to whatever she can find in the fridge or pantry. It reached a point where the hosting friend actually told this woman she needs to provide her own food when she visits, which did not go over well, understandably, and ended with accusations of the host, quote, shaming her. So our number is 877-301-8970. Is the snacking friend, the visitor, right? Was this host, in fact, being an a-hole for imposing this bring your own snacks decree, or is the friend who thinks they're entitled to raid the kitchen when they visit this week's a-hole? The number is 877-301-8970. Now, I'm a big eater.
Yes.
I can't imagine going to someone's house and eating $40 to $60 worth of groceries.
Well,
That's a lot of groceries.
Groceries are very expensive now.
Yeah.
You go through them pretty quick. You ate a lot of cheese, a lot of ice cream. You could go through
$40 to $60.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could do it. You know those hors d'oeuvres you get at places like Trader Joe's. You put them in,
Trader
in the microwave.
Joe's is really expensive.
But they're not. But
one of our coworkers said, like 6 eggs. That'd be $40 to $60.
You go through a lot. I mean, I could see it. And she talks about how she'll have like a multi-pack of food, and say it's like a big package of whatever it is, pizzas or pierogies or whatever it is, and the person will leave her like one or two and eat all the rest.
Well, you know what she does, by the way? I do. When I'm feeling down, I do eat. I eat to address this thing. And she says that her friend most often comes over because she's feeling, a little unhappy at times.
And she's a comfort food person.
Exactly.
She struggles, she eats too much, and she struggles with that. But the problem is, this person says at the beginning, she's on a limited budget. She said, she's struggling herself to pay her bills. So if somebody comes over when she's feeling down and just eats throughout the house and home, I could see where she might.
So you think the big eater, the visiting friend, is the a-hole?
I think the visiting friend should realize that she is wiping her out of her groceries and maybe chip in and bring something.
Well, you're
when she
tough.
Comes over. Okay, what do you?
I mean,
what do
the
you
woman's
think?
struggling, and she comes over because she needs help, so she eats a few things out of the fridge. I mean, that's
she said she
what?
eats $40 to $60.
$40.
Well, I mean, she could be making a steak right there in the middle of the kitchen for all we know.
Could. Well, by the way, to split the baby here's a solution which I think could solve both sides' needs. The host should give the friend when they come over like tokens, and let's say every token is worth $5, and say she can use 2 tokens per visit as opposed to whatever. Who is the a-hole here? Is it the snacking friend who comes over in times of need and needs $40 to $60 allegedly of groceries, or is the a-hole the hosting friend who says essentially you have to bring your own food, which is really pretty incredible.
In this case, the visitor is the a-hole, and prior to the next visit, I would try to eat every scrap of food in the house and then watch their expressions. They looked around frantically for the expected treats. You know, I told this before. When I was young, somebody was living on our third floor.
Yeah, we all know who it was.
Pay the mortgage there.
And you know who it is out there, too. We're not telling you.
He was a big eater and a big drinker.
Wonderful guy.
We just bought a fifth of vodka because we're having people over. Wow, what happened to that fifth of vodka? And then things like that. My kids love those little Dove bars, the expensive little individual ones.
I know what they are.
Yeah,
sure. Gone.
Gone. Gone. Cheese gone.
So did you tell me how to bring his own
gone,
snacks?
Cheeseburgers gone.
Did you tell me how to bring his own snacks?
Well, I was hoping he might replace some of the things, but that did not happen.
You know, by the way, I am pretty much willing to say anything to anybody. I know you know. I don't think I could say to somebody, even if they were eating all my food, which is pretty precious to me, that you have to bring your own stuff. I mean, that's a tough one, don't you think?
It is a tough one. But you could plead poverty. You could say, I'm really struggling myself, and maybe if you could contribute something, we could eat it together or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
No. 877-301-8097. It's a pretty straightforward one. Who is the a-hole here? Again, the heavily snacking visiting friend or the hosting friend who says, bring your own snacks because I can't afford to have you come over all the time.
The host should keep a vial of Ozempic and inadvertently jab the friend to curb
really
the appetite.
She has the same thing I have. What is it called? Not emotional eating. What's it called?
Well,
when you're stressed, I eat when I'm stressed.
She's got an eating disorder, I guess.
I don't know if it's a disorder.
Well, she struggles with overeating. So what's that?
Oh, that's an eating disorder.
And she does have a tendency to find comfort in food and often struggles with her overeating, says the host.
I just came up with another compromise.
What?
Put locks on the refrigerator. Is 877-301-8970. Who's the a-hole? Dan and Natick, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
First time, long time.
Wow.
I don't know why I chose this as the first time to call. But
that's what we're thinking. Go ahead.
There you go. So I honestly think they're both the a-hole, and I'll tell you why. It's a little bit. I understand how irksome it is to have somebody come over and eat all your food. That happens to me sometimes. So the person that eats all the food, you kind of have to recognize that you're, doing this to your friend, but also to call somebody out on that is not really great friend behavior. So what I think is a good middle ground to achieve here is to say, hey, next time this person wants to come over, let's go meet at a cafe or a restaurant or something, and then you can split the bill at the end of the.
That's brilliant, actually. That's why you made your first call on this. That was a very Solomonic recommendation.
But the problem, Dan, if the woman that's the host says she's really struggling financially, and she probably couldn't really go out. I mean, if she's worried about her eating 40 or 60...
you can always go get a cup of coffee or something.
Well, a cup of coffee is not what you want if you're a comfort food overeating kind of person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But as you said, that the woman who had the eating problem said that the host was an a-hole for shaming her biggest insecurity and singling her out.
By the way, she didn't shame her. She said, I can't afford to have you eat me out of house and home every time you come over. Joel from Connecticut said, at least this one doesn't apply to Jim on his birthday since he brings his own birthday cake.
Yeah.
That one year I brought my own birthday cake. That was
And she also, the poor woman with the eating problem said, she pointed out to the host that she didn't have this rule for her other friends. And,
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I didn't read that
And the
part.
host tried to explain that was because they didn't eat so much that she felt the need to implement any kind of restrictions. Oh, my God.
This is
person
getting
probably
worse
goes
and worse.
home and eats more and more and more. That's awful.
This is too depressing
Adele
to
from
talk
Providence.
about.
What do you
Hello,
think?
Adele.
Hi. I had a boyfriend that would appear now and then, and he would bring no food and expected to eat, and I took everything out, including the toilet paper, out of the bathroom.
What, he'd take your rolls of toilet paper?
No, but he would eat everything. So I really thought I'd bring it home, and I started to take the toilet paper and just leave a little bit on the rolls.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not following you. What's toilet paper got to do with eating?
Oh, I hope.
Well, the cycle, however.
Okay, we don't need to hear that one, Adele. Thank you. Let's stay with the eating, if you know what I mean. So how did it work out? Tell us the end of the story.
Well, the end of the story is that, he had enough toilet paper, but I encouraged him to bring a snack. That's all you can say, because we're all on budgets. I bring my own snack when I visit a friend when I'm hungry.
You do?
So why don't you say, sure. Every time I'm there, I'm hungry.
Okay. I think
it's a drive.
We got it. Adele, thank you for your little history lesson. Thank you. No, really, it was an interesting historical story. An anonymous texter says the host should just pay the copay for a friend to go to therapy. Might be cheaper. That's unkind.
I remember going to a celebration. I think it was a birthday or an anniversary. I forget what it was.
Ooh.
And somebody had a whole big thing of tenderloin of beef, which is very expensive.
Yeah.
And we all were remarking there was one person up there that just went up to the buffet and they loaded 6 slices of tenderloin.
Was I there?
I mean, they went through a third of the tenderloin and they just took it back to the table and they promptly ate it all up. It was unbelievable.
What's the problem with that?
Well, I think you might maybe take 2, maybe 3 pieces, but not this whole plate full of tenderloin. So people ran out really quickly of the tenderloin. You know what I mean?
I think I do. 877-301-8970. Who's the a-hole here? What is the consensus so far?
The consensus is that the person who comes and eats this woman out of house and home is the a-hole.
But she's got issues, and she's going to her friend to try to get a little solace, a little friendship and hope and help.
Why can't she bring her own bag of chips or salsa?
Because she can't afford $40 to $60 of food every time she goes over.
Hold on. That's the host that can't afford the $40 to $60. I think the woman who visits could bring maybe $15 worth of food. What do you think?
Rob in New Hampshire, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you. So I think the woman who's coming over is taking advantage of this woman personally.
Yeah.
I wanted to also comment. Yeah, I wanted to comment also, though, that I think people are getting down on the host because of the way she's responding to this, which does seem kind of rude.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it sounds like this has been going on for a while. This is a last resort here. This is the only way that she's been able to figure out how to keep this woman from eating all of her food, is to say no more. I mean, there are definitely more polite ways to do it, but I think she's probably tried those other ways.
Well, that is actually probably true. That is a very good point that's missing from the story. Maybe she has tried kinder things, and this is her last resort. Rob, thank you for your call. We
Mary of
appreciate it.
Raynham says, with the price of food, the visitor knows what she's doing. Maybe the person should hide her food, only keeping a little bit out for both of them. And people are saying she really shouldn't go through the refrigerator or the cupboard. She should just eat what she's offered by the host. And I mean, I think the consensus is that the freeloader, so-called, is
She's not a
the a-hole.
freeloader.
Well, the texters are calling her a freeloader.
Dano in Dudley says, quote, this is from the host, here's a bag of carrots, knock yourself out.
Dave in the car says, just
That's a
buy
good one.
liverwurst that has to be eaten straight out of the tube.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you like?
That is not, I don't like it. I love it.
Visiting friend is a textbook bully. What do you think of
Visiting
that?
friend?
Visiting friend.
Boy, you guys are really unsympathetic to somebody she's having a tough time.
She's having a tough time.
And she eats and she's going to her friends to have a little food.
She's having a tough time 2 or 3 nights a week. It's supper time.
I'm trying, again,
She
I am
shows up.
I want to go back to what I said. I am a rather large eater. Would you agree with
You
that?
are a
I don't
large
mean I'm a
eater.
large eater. I eat a lot of food as a large person. I don't know if I could eat 40 to 60 unless they had, unless they had beef tenderloin stacked up in the refrigerator. $40 to $60 is a huge, by the way, it's not at a restaurant. It's at someone's house. How do you do that? I mean, think about it.
Well, that's why.
You have a piece of
That's
toast.
why this is a problem, Jim.
Maybe it is.
$40 to $60. I mean, it's your whole probably budget for the week for shopping.
Yeah.
Maybe you do $100 worth of food, but if you're a single person, you're probably not buying that much food. She's wiping it right out.
My
Megan-
favorite, by the way, I'm going to tell a story for
Okay.
new listeners before we get back to the calls. And Marjorie can't yell at me because while I have told it a lot, I've not told it in about a year. We had somebody come in here about 6 or 7 years ago who I think was the Secretary of Health and Human Services in Massachusetts. And he brought in somebody who was involved, I think it was one of Jim McGovern's things, Congressman
It was Jim
McGovern.
McGovern.
One of the things you do
told
is
us a million times.
for a week, you eat on a SNAP budget, a food stamp budget, to show how difficult it is for people on food stamps to get by. So our producers said, when you come in, could you bring all that you're able to buy with the food stamp budget for the week? And they did, and it laid it on the table, and it was it wasn't a lot of food at all. That wasn't the problem. What was the problem, Marjorie?
I thought they brought it like as a gift for us to share.
So Marjorie started eating
I
their
did.
week's allotment of SNAP
I did.
food.
It was bad.
And it was good.
I shouldn't
Hummus.
have done that.
I remember it. Hummus, French
yeah.
bread, things like that. And that was the end of the woman's diet for the week.
Megan in Newburyport. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah.
Hey, you guys. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Another one. Thank you.
Yeah. So anyways, a little bit of both. So first of all, I was always taught never show up empty-handed.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true. That's true.
Right. I was always, and also I kind of agree with the anonymous caller of the copay. It sort of sounds like, do you ever show up on a positive note? Right? Like, are we ever, right. So, like, what?
That's a good point.
And also, to just, I'm going to put it out there. Like, I might have some clients listening to me. I am a mental health therapist, right? So, like, I want people to come over when they want to celebrate, too, as well as when they want to, decompress and this and that. But, like, for sure, I love to feed my guests. I like to feed them, and I am not a nickel and dimer. They are going to eat well. But if anybody was all up in my fridge, I'm sorry. Get out.
Exactly.
Wow.
I mean, that
Hell
sounds
of a
like
first
what she's
call,
doing.
Megan. Thank you for the
she's
call.
going through the whole thing. She asks her all the time if she can come over. She says she's having a hard time, needs a friend, and then she comes and eats all the groceries. Now, here's a texter who says, put price tags on your food like in the supermarket.
Oh, that's hospitable.
And then you can
That's
get a
really.
presenter with a bill.
You want to see what Jay and Brighton said?
Jay and Brighton says, can't they agree to meet at the Whole Foods hot bar, and then they can both enjoy free food like Jim does. Do you have any advice in that regard?
You can do it. You're not supposed to do it, by the way. You're not supposed to do sampling at the hot food bar, but I am not the only one who occasionally has. 877-301-8970.
Listen to this texture. I had a friend like that. I called him out, and he started bringing snacks or Venmoing me if he ate a ton of food, greater than $50 or so. He brings top cheeses and meats, so it's all good now.
So wait a second. Another person whose friend eats more than $50
think about
of
it.
food when they come to your house?
Some things are really expensive. Meat's really expensive. Cheese can be very expensive. Even ice cream can be like, $4. How much does it cost for a pint of ice cream now? Like $4?
No, a cheap one is like $4. And if you go to one of those elite,
Expensive
like
ones?
hand scooping things, it could be like $8
Well, there
or
you
$9.
go. Well,
or...
you can get to $40 pretty quick then, Jim.
Well, what are they going to have? 8 pints of ice cream when they come to your house?
Listen.
By the way, listen to this bit. This person says, Sheila's her name, says she's the biggest BPR booster on our YouTube streams. She says this topic really is the bottom of the barrel. And your point is what? What is your point, Sheila?
I guess she doesn't like it.
She doesn't?
I guess not.
What else is this segment but bottom of the barrel? And we do it every Thursday. Get over it, Sheila.
Catherine from Charlestown.
Jesus.
Hi, Catherine.
Hello there.
Hi. I was going to say, talk about rude.
Exactly. Thank you, Catherine.
Sheila.
What's up, Catherine?
I was just going to say, the whole cost thing I could see easily piling up at a restaurant or at home. I would just do, popcorn kernels and just make popcorn, or they could make the popcorn.
Yeah.
And you could eat, popcorn forever, and that should cure your munchies, and it costs nothing.
Yeah, but the problem, let me tell you.
Not be giving her really nice food, and she could have popcorn.
But the problem, I hate to switch sides here, she doesn't give her all this food. The visiting woman takes it. She goes in the fridge. She rummages around. And so I don't think the popcorn would ward off her desire for the good stuff. Do you know what I mean, Catherine?
Oh, I was going to say, that would be too simple, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Catherine.
I will say, I took someone out to dinner once who was visiting, and I lived in one room at the time, so it's quite clear I didn't have tons of money.
Yeah.
And this guy bought every single course there was. I was so mad afterwards that I wrote a letter and broke up with him. So that was kind of rude.
Wow.
So I can see losing it too.
He went through and he ate all your food.
No, he ordered everything on the menu, she said. She took him out to dinner. And he
how obnoxious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Including wine and port.
Listen to this one.
Port.
Hey, Catherine, that was great. Thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Listen to this. This is maybe a little hostile. The Hoover of a guest is the a-hole.
I love that
Clearly,
expression.
Hoover has pushed the friend over the edge, and the host can't afford to have Hogwalla and Hogwalla's lack of boundaries in her home. If Hogwalla cares about the friend, the host, then Hogwalla should bring something, as all normal guests do, and would not need to be asked.
Yeah, but what is she going to bring? Like a shopping bag of food?
I don't know. You can get a long way with a big bag of potato chips. I mean, who doesn't love potato chips?
Why would you want potato chips if you have $40 to $60 of good things at your friend's house? Now, here is a text from a GBH colleague who wants to be anonymous. That's troubling to me. Says, my wife hides the snacks when one of my friends comes over because he sticks his hands in everything.
There you go.
Who do you think that is?
I don't know.
Wow, that is incredible. Can you guys type on the screen and tell us who it is, please? Kim in Rhode Island, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Who's the a-hole? Welcome.
The guest is the a-hole, but the host mishandled things.
Oh, go ahead.
The host should, on the next visit, should have just set boundaries. Here are sandwiches, here are snacks, here are cookies. I set out a lovely plate for us, and if you should need more, just you need to speak with me. I don't want you in my kitchen. And secondly, to that thought, if this person is an emotional eater, her friend should be helping her to set her own boundaries.
That's actually a very rational, I think, fairly caring response. Kim, thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate it.
And here's a nice creative one, too, from Dan and Randolph. The eater is at fault, but maybe the host should plan to make and share a meal. A big pile of pasta is filling and not very expensive.
Well, that's a variation of what the caller just said, is you put out a platter of things and say the refrigerator is off limits. How do you do that?
Lots of other people are saying you need to have a large cooler and hide it in the closet when the friend comes over. Or
what do you take everything out of your refrigerator and put it in the closet?
That's what they're suggesting. That's Joe in Wakefield.
Yeah.
And then Dennis in Bellingham says the host should buy a complete other refrigerator for the basement and not tell the friend, just keep a few morsels in the fridge upstairs.
In any case, Emily in Quincy, what's your deal?
Hi.
Hi.
I am a emotional eater. I actually have an eating disorder called binge eating disorder.
Oh.
And so I understand where this woman is coming from. However, I think it's extremely rude of her to go into the person's refrigerator without asking her. And I think it's extremely rude of her to eat. I mean, when I go to somebody else's house, I curb myself. I have to. I know how rude it is to eat everything. It's also embarrassing.
Well, that's another good point, actually. Emily, thanks for your candid call. We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
When I was living hand to mouth, when friends came over, I would make a snack plate, and when it's gone, and then break out the multiple cups of tea.
Okay, fine. Several people have said that. So you make a snack plate, okay? And you say, here's the food. And your friend wanders into the kitchen.
That's right.
What do you say? Stop? What do you do? I mean, how do you do that?
Well, I think that's one of the problems, that this woman is very aggressive about grabbing the food. She'd have to be to get up to $40 to $60 worth of food every time she comes over.
What if you put like a dog gate between... What if with a lock between like the room you're sitting in and the kitchen?
I don't know. Maybe you have to lock the cabinets all together, too.
This is a really troubling dilemma. We have time for one more call.
Barbara in Cape Cod. What do you think, Barbara?
Hello, Barbara.
Hi, I listen all the time, and I love listening. I have a couple of things to say. One is, this doesn't seem like a friendship. This sounds like a drive-through window where this person comes over, and when they want something, I could say, when she calls and says, I'm feeling really low, I might say, I'll be right over.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Go to her house.
Yeah, go to her house. Or else, if she starts rooting around in the kitchen, just say, what can I help you find? I really would prefer if you let me find things for you. I just don't think it's a friendship, because I only see it one way here right now. That this lady just comes to your house, and what if she wants all your alcohol? What if she wants to use your checks? I don't know.
That's right.
You just have to stop somewhere.
Hey, Barbara, that was a great analysis. Thank you for your call. How would you deal with this, Jared? Someone comes over to your house. What?
James in the car says, if you invite me to your house, I'm bringing an appetite. Be prepared.
So you don't have anything in your refrigerator. Is that what you tell us all the time, or what?
No, so that would be a great trick. They go to the refrigerator and there's nothing there.
Did you tell me you had a bottle of vodka?
I think I said a bottle of vodka and Thin Mints. Thank you very much.
Well, you have nothing in your refrigerator?
I have a couple things. There's some hummus. If you want the hummus, have at it.
Do you eat out every single night?
I guess I eat out a lot, or I pick something up on the way home.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm out all the time.
So what do you think of this dilemma? What do you think? Who's the a-hole here?
Well, I think it is the person who's eating and eating and eating. Because, well, if you're the host, what are you supposed to do? It's kind of passive-aggressive if you just put out some carrot sticks. If you padlock the fridge, that's aggressive-aggressive.
That is aggressive.
So it doesn't turn out very well in either regard.
Sad story.
I think no one was defending the woman who was eating so much.
I was defending. I felt bad for her.
Okay.
Is this the part where we find out that they've been running State Street Bank for 14 years, and so the person who's coming over feels entitled to maybe have a big snack?
Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe the
Not
woman
that it should matter.
The hostess is loaded. That could be.
What are you doing on the show there, Jared Bone?
We're going to be speaking with Fabiola Jean-Louis, who has an amazing exhibition at the Gardner Museum right now. Yeah, we'll talk about it next week. So she's in the studio with us talking about this. And then we'll speak with Naveen Kumar. This is so interesting. He's the Washington Post theater critic, had a back injury, and realized he couldn't sit for shows. So he had to stand in 2 months. So he did his entire job standing up. So we talk about his experience doing
how
that.
different it is if you stand versus sit?
And where you stand. And
How could you it'd be hard to take notes?
Not really.
Oh, can I tell you, I've stood in the back of theaters.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
love standing in the back.
You
And you
do?
have a little railing kind of thing where you can do a little writing deal.
And I remember standing next to Marjorie at press conferences, and you were standing
That's true.
taking notes.
No, that's true. You're right.
Why don't you remember that?
I don't know.
Okay, fine.
I forget a
Is
lot
that
of
it, or is
things.
it somebody
and then the
else?
Alvin Ailey Dance Company. If you
they're
talk
coming
about
to town.
Participation, they're going to teach people at 4 locations over the weekend how to do the moves from Revelations.
Okay, I won't be there.
Oh,
okay. So that's it. It's 2:00 your show.
2
Is
o'clock.
that correct?
Yep.
2:00 every day. That'd be Jared Bone. Jared, it's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jared Bowen. A
What are you
parent
looking
of 2 teens says, I have teen kids who bring over their friends. I might as well live in a grocery store.
No, that's
And
hard
that
when
is
your
true.
kids are teenagers.
Especially if you get sons. Oh, my God.
You had one of those.
I did.
I didn't have any of
You
those.
have the entire basketball team or baseball team come over, and that was
Very sad
a
stuff.
lot of food. Anyway, welcome back. Oh,
No,
so
that's
on
the
wrong
beginning of the
page.
show.
We're done. Not welcome back. Thanks for listening to another edition. I made a few mistakes today, Jim, but what else is new?
Welcome
Keep up
back.
with the 24/7 way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, going to be at the Boston Public Library with Cuban-born jazz pianist Zélie Zamora and a much-missed local woman, Sue O'Connell. She's going to be returning.
Great.
Plus, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner about all this legal stuff that Trump is doing. GBH's Adam Riley and Callie Crossley for our media analysis segment, Press Play. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John LaClaw Parker, our executive producer Jane Bologna, and our streaming staff Patrick Lally and Colin Cockrell. Stay tuned for Jared Bowen and the Culture Show, which starts right after us here in 89.7 GBH.
Can I ask you one question? Paula, is this the beginning of the show or the end? No, this is the end of the show, right?
Who am I, Jim, and why am I here?
I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm...
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show. Next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Boston Ballet, presenting Winter Experience. This program of dancing is full of grace, athleticism, and artistry. On stage now through March 30th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org. On the next Local Lens, a ballerina who defected from the Soviet Union trains a group of students at Boston Ballet. Don't miss Woman in the Mirror, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org